I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Thursday, March 11th, 2021. The time is 3:11 in the afternoon. And this hearing is being conducted virtually. It is being broadcast live over the Council Chairman's website, which is www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. Again, Chairman Mendelson, one word, .com/live. And it will be available soon thereafter, maybe a couple of days later, on the council's website, which is www.dccouncil.us. This is the third hearing as part of our series of hearings at this time of year on agency performance. The first two hearings were concerned public education. Today, we will be hearing testimony from agency directors, so to speak, for the following in this order: the Statehood Commission, represented by Senator Paul Strauss, the District of Columbia Auditor, the Office of Budget and Planning, which is within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, the District of Columbia Retirement Board, and the other Post-Employment Benefits Administration, which is administered by the Treasurer through the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. So we'll be hearing in that order. I will recognize Senator Strauss in just a moment. We will continue with our performance oversight hearings next week. On Monday afternoon, we will be hearing testimony regarding the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Agency, or WMATA. And on Wednesday, March 17th, we will be hearing testimony from the Commission on Arts and Humanities and the University of the District of Columbia. On Thursday, the 18th, we will hear testimony from noon to 3 from the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, the Office of Zoning, the Office of Planning, and the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs. And that will conclude next Thursday our performance oversight hearings by the Committee of the Whole. And I believe that's the last day for hearings by other committees as part of this performance oversight. We will be receiving the budget from the mayor for fiscal year 2022, as well as we expect a supplemental or revised budget for the current fiscal year on or about Thursday, April 22nd. I think that's the correct day. It might be April 23rd. And the committees will commence with hearings on the budgets proposed for the agencies under their purview. The schedule for those budget hearings will be adopted by the council this coming Tuesday, March 16th, and then will be published both on the council's website as well as in the District of Columbia web register, I believe. So we will proceed now with testimony from Senator Strauss, and then I will take each agency in turn. I don't believe the other council members present at this point. So Senator, good afternoon. It may just be you and me.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and anybody else that may be joining us today. I'm Paul Strauss. I have the privilege of being the senior United States Senator representing the citizens of the District of Columbia. Thank you for the privilege to appear before you today to discuss the activities of the new Columbia Statehood Commission. I'm pleased to speak about our performance during the current year, especially in front of one of our co-chairs, along with Mayor Bowser, and in conjunction with my fellow commissioners, and in accordance with Section 2.3 of the Commission's bylaws. The Commission has been promoting DC statehood not only locally, but nationally and internationally. And we want to thank both you, Chairman Mendelson, and the Mayor for your leadership of the Commission throughout this unusual year. The virtual nature of this hearing is an ongoing reminder that this is still a very unprecedented time for all of us on the Commission and throughout our nation. The tragic events of 2020 and early 2021 have only made it clearer how important full statehood is to the people of Washington, D.C. Throughout this public health emergency and the more recent domestic terror attacks and threats, the Commission has done our best to adapt to the current realities while continuing to perform advocacy and education on statehood, which has never been more critical. Our budgeted statehood initiatives are designed for the purpose of educating and advocating and promoting statehood and full voting rights for the people of Washington, D.C., taking that message to the people of the 50 states, and presenting even our lack of voting rights to the international community. These initiatives and outreach focus the importance of media on both television and radio, as well as direct outreach to citizens of Washington, D.C., and in the targeted states. And of course, over the year, we've been raising the issue in the national media as well as the international media. Appearances and talks about statehood that used to be confined to local TV are now heard routinely, with Commission members appearing on MSNBC, Fox, national news shows. I myself have appeared on Bloomberg and BBC around the world, as well as other national media outlets, and of course, our local ones as well. We've done targeted interviews in special states like West Virginia, where we know that there are key constituencies. And as the world remained at home, our outreach activities that were ongoing, such as Senator Brown's radio show on BBS Radio, continued and found even broader and more direct audiences. The DC Statehood TV show, which was popular on public access, is moving towards wider apps, including a social media app called Clubhouse, which now reaches over 10 million weekly active members. And while people were at home, our 51 Stars campaign continued to outreach, bringing the message of Hollywood celebrities, our 51 Hollywood stars, to help us get that 51 stars on the flag. We've continued, even despite the pandemic and enhanced security, to outreach and engage directly with congressional offices, many using the new technologies like we're using today. We continue to make virtual contact with key members of the Senate. And of course, we're very excited, a little disappointed it didn't happen today, but very excited that the House will soon proceed with its hearing on H.R. 51. We understand that you will be joining the mayor and representing the commission at that public hearing before the House. And we have every confidence that we will be well represented by you as well. The District of Columbia continues its struggle, but it's not unique in the United States. And our examples of advocating for DC statehood have inspired activities in Puerto Rico as well. Coordinating with the Mayor's Office of Federal and Regional Affairs, we routinely network and dialogue with our counterparts at the Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Agency. And I've personally spoken with the newly elected governor, Pierluisi, about Puerto Rico's plans for statehood. The issues are obviously different between what we face here in DC and the challenges facing Commonwealth residents on the island. But it's important that while there are competing or complementing statehood bills in each chamber, that we understand the strategies of the other, and that we make sure that what we're doing complements each other and doesn't necessarily interfere or adversely affect the activities. We appreciate the universal support of the entities from Puerto Rico for DC statehood, and as they resolve their issues on status, we do what we can to at least be a guide in terms of historical reference. That happened recently when Puerto Rico's control board actually overturned the attempt by the governor to implement a law passed by their legislature to elect a shadow delegation of their own. And we were asked for guidance on how we functioned during our days under the control board, something that I still remember well, and we were pleased to provide that level of cooperation. Additionally, we were pleased to support the application of the territory of Guam into the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization. And we continue to work closely with the legislature of Guam and their speaker's office as they advocate for greater self-determination and raise the questions about their status. Again, DC and Guam, in many ways, two very different territories, but it's important that we begin to explore and dialogue with other unrepresented Americans so that we can continue to have outreach. And at the beginning of the fiscal year, in the days before the pandemic hit, we had a tremendously successful outreach to Iowa during the caucuses, where delegation members and supporters and our own Iowans for DC Statehood group were able to network directly with now President Biden when he was just a candidate, First Lady Jill Biden, Vice President Harris, and then key senators that were also on the campaign trail like Amy Klobuchar, and solidify their commitments for DC statehood as well. Those Iowa caucuses were high visibility ways in which we were able to engage not just with the people of Iowa, not just with those presidential candidates, but with national and even international media. And we continue to benefit from those relationships. Little did we know then it may have been the last opportunity to have one-on-one communication with some of those folks. So we certainly recognize that this has been an unusual and an unprecedented year. The world literally saw how DC statehood is more than just a political issue. It's one not just of equal rights, civil rights, but literally life or death. The lack of funding and equality that we got in the coronavirus funding bill was the first tragic reminder that our political status has a detrimental effect on our public health. We only got 1/3 of the resources at the time when we needed it. And while we're glad that the bill that the president just signed today will retroactively make us whole, the idea that we didn't follow the science and let politics interfere in our ability to fight this deadly virus is just ludicrous. The virus certainly didn't know that we were a territory and not a state. The virus didn't make our people only 1/3 as sick. The virus didn't allow us to suffer only a 1/3 loss of life. And yet tragically, that 1/3 of the funding that we got initially handicapped our ability to get the resources we needed to the people that had it. And while we often talk of statehood in terms of needing a congressman or a voting senator, the reality is one of the things that really underscored this year was how badly we need a governor. President Trump was able to send the National Guard in to attack peaceful protesters in the streets of Washington, D.C., but not Washington State, because Washington State had a governor, and we did not. That same lack of a governor and gubernatorial authority handicapped us from calling out the National Guard when we needed them in January. And while there's so much to say about the tragic loss of life, the violence, the injured police officers, the threat to our homeland by the domestic terrorists that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, is particularly galling to us DC residents, because for so many generations we were told that one of the justifications for DC statehood was DC's lack of statehood was that centuries ago an angry mob stormed what was then a Congress of the United States under the Articles of Confederation, and they couldn't get help from the Pennsylvania state militia, and somehow that justified our lack of statehood because it protected Congress from an intrusion that could threaten our democracy. Clearly, our lack of statehood didn't make the Congress any safer. It made them more vulnerable. And hopefully Americans now realize that once we get statehood, we can take our rightful part in keeping all Americans safe, and put 2 more Americans to work in the Senate and 1 more voting representative to work in the House on solving the important problems we face together as a nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm proud of the work we all do together on the commission, and I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator Strauss. It's good to see you. I'm sorry that I'm not seeing your colleague, Senator Brown, here, or the new representative. Has the new representative been fully onboarded and apprised of resources available through the commission?
Yes, we continue to have regular meetings with him. In fact, we even got to had one last night. The office itself remains physically closed due to the ongoing public health emergency. But we continue to talk frequently and have engaged him in a variety of ways. We're particularly glad to have him this year because he's a licensed pharmacist and public health professional himself. He brings an informed perspective to the District of Columbia. And if there was ever a good time to have someone in your delegation who was licensed to administer vaccines, this would be the year.
I think I muted myself. So he's fully onboarded, fully participating, fully up to speed.
Statehood is a steep learning curve, but we're doing our best to make sure that he's fully up to speed. And I myself have personally spent time making sure that his statehood fund is being established and that we're taking him through the process. And I was very pleased. And in fact, I thank you for reminding me to mention this. But just yesterday, we got the findings of the annual audit, which I'm pleased to say was a 100% clean audit with no adverse findings. Yes, so despite the usual complications that may come from the building not being open, he's being fully integrated into the delegation's activities.
Good. How have you all been able to lobby members of Congress, given that the Capitol office buildings are physically inaccessible?
We have become adept at all of the media, such as we're using now, whether it's Zoom, WebEx, the members of the Senate. Many of those offices, while functioning remotely, still make themselves accessible. And so we have frequent meetings with key Senate staff and members through meetings just like this. And we hope that as the vaccine rollout and abated crisis continues to improve, that we can resume more direct face-to-face meetings as well. Is getting back on the road ourselves and resuming travel to targeted states, something that we've had to suspend this year due to the public health emergency.
So do your colleagues keep a record of the number of meetings you've had with members of Congress?
The members keep our individual calendars, but our combined staff generally tracks contacts with members. So
Okay.
I believe so I believe the answer to that question is yes, but we haven't even physically seen each other. But
Let me move on. You now have, I guess you refers to the commission, now have 2 full-time employees, one of whom has the title of acting executive director. So the delegation has finally moved to the model of having an executive director?
To the extent that there needs to be someone who fulfills that role and works with all of us and coordinates meetings and so forth, through the personnel system, the position is officially known as a legislative specialist, but we do have most of the functions of most of the staff are shared, and most of the staff perform services and degrees of assistance for all members, while we also continue to work autonomously on our own projects.
So does he or she have the title executive director or acting executive director?
It's a for point of reference, it's a designation that we know that was something that the commission that you wanted to see more centralized control. The official position through the DCHR classification system is legislative specialist, but she functions in that way.
As the executive director. And why acting?
Well, again, we haven't moved towards the official position in the way that you had originally envisioned it, but we're moving closer towards a more centralized system. So,
Which is good, because I think that way you'll be able to maximize your staff allocation. So when will the position be made permanent as opposed to acting?
I don't know that there's any plans to really change the structure per se. Again, it all is contingent on the model that the delegation would want to get forward to. We want to be able to make sure that we have projects that allow the members to work both autonomously as well as collectively. So to the extent that somebody needs to be a centralized point of contact for the office on things like communicating with Mr. Cash in your office and things like that, we have someone designated as a central point, but we will continue to work. The way the funding works, there are these various statehood initiatives and different projects, and different members and different staff will work on those different projects.
You were starting to say something about travel, and I think I cut you off. So I'm assuming that over the past year, you and your colleagues have done very little travel. Is that correct? And have you tried to work around that, or are you looking to resume travel? That's two questions.
You are correct. The last trip we made in the previous fiscal year was the Iowa caucuses, and we had big plans to go to targeted states throughout the calendar, and of course that all changed about a year ago, and so we have not done any direct person-to-person travel. A lot of the meetings that we would have gone to switched to virtual meetings. So attending gatherings of things like the UNPO and other groups, meetings of various conferences all went online. And so we continue to participate in them that way. But I think that there's, at the end of the day, once it's safe to do so, and we're not planning on jumping the gun or moving too quickly on this, there's often not a substitute for being in certain communities and getting a feel for them and letting them hear directly from people. So it is our hope that we can resume that as soon as possible, but we have followed all of the public health guidelines and are doing our best to keep everybody safe during these difficult times.
I do not have any other questions for you at this time. Thank you, Senator, and I appreciate your responsiveness both with this hearing, our pre-hearing questions, and you continue to show up, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, and as the ranking member, there are certain obligations we have. Please don't take the fact that I'm here and not the colleagues as a lack of interest or enthusiasm. We know that there are times when it's important that the delegation and even the commission speak with one voice. And so that's what we're attempting to do today. But I know all of the elected members are enthusiastic about the work we do on behalf of Statehood.
Thank you. Thank you. You're excused, and we'll see you around. The next agency is the District of Columbia Auditor. We will first hear from Patrick McGlone, who is President of the Council for Court Excellence. And I believe he's testifying separately, and then we will hear from Kathy Patterson, who is the auditor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson.
Good afternoon.
I know you and I have met in the past, and I know you'll recall that my name is Patrick McGlone, and I'm the President of the Council for Court Excellence. Please note that per our policy, no judicial member of CCE participated in the formulation or approval of this testimony, and the testimony does not reflect the specific views of or endorsement by any judicial member of CCE. The Office of the District of Columbia Auditor plays an invaluable role in the district, producing reports and examinations that are important to our community and addressing timely and important public issues. This has been particularly true in the last year in FY 2020 and already in FY 2021. ODCA was able to research and publish timely reports on emerging COVID-19 issues related to funding for the district's coronavirus response and the quality of data reporting. Other recent ODCA evaluations help local residents and policymakers understand issues surrounding the district's revenue, the role of advisory neighborhood commissions, and other programs. As a proud Ward 4 resident and as president of CCE, I'm grateful for ODCA's work that covers both high-profile issues as well as those that may not otherwise have come to public attention. In addition to the audits that ODCA performs in-house, it also does some of its work in public-private partnership with local organizations with relevant expertise and capacity, including the Council for Court Excellence. In August 2020, ODCA released Everything is Scattered, the intersection of substance abuse disorders and incarcerations in the district, which was researched and prepared by CCE. Despite national and local attention on the opioid epidemic, little was actually known about the effectiveness of the substance use disorder, or SUD, services provided to DC's justice-involved residents before this audit. For this project, CCE examined DC criminal justice and health data between 2015 and 2018, creating a data set with over 4,600 records to produce a first-ever analysis of SUD treatment, arrests, and incarcerations in DC. Without ODCA's leadership and the authority of the DC Council behind that office, our team would not have been able to work with the executive branch to build an interagency data set with anonymized records from the Department of Behavioral Health, Department of Corrections, Department of Healthcare Finance, MPD, and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. This data allowed CCE to follow the contacts of justice-involved adults through the stages of assessment and treatment in the community, to arrest, incarceration, and release back into the community. The findings from this data were stark. Our review revealed that only a tiny fraction, just over 1%, of the incarcerated individuals associated with a SUD in the 4,602 cases analyzed received SUD services before, during, and after incarceration. This suggests that virtually no one in this vulnerable population receives the benefit of complete continuity of care. At the same time, our analysis showed the positive effect when people do get SUD care in the first 90 days after incarceration, with lower odds of bad outcomes like arrest, incarceration, and fatal overdose than those who do not get any SUD care after their incarceration.
I can interrupt. Is that 90 days after the start of incarceration or 90 days after the completion of incarceration?
90 days after the completion of incarceration. The same was also true for people who got care during their incarceration. Those with continuous care had nearly half the chance of negative outcomes relative to discontinuous care. Unfortunately, our data evaluation also found that DOC was not successfully identifying all individuals who entered their custody with SUDs who may have benefited from treatment while incarcerated. This was in part due to their screening program's reliance on an individual's willingness to self-report rather than being able to use data with client consent from providers, DBH, or DHCF about whether that person had been getting care in the community. In our data, about 40% of the records evaluated had some indicator that an incarcerated individual had a SUD, yet only 8% of the individuals who were getting SUD care right before their incarceration were detected by DOC as having a SUD. We know that DOC has been working to improve this and has expanded its contract with healthcare providers, its healthcare provider, to provide more SUD care and screening. These are but a few examples of what the ODC data analysis found. I encourage interested council members to read our report, and we are, of course, happy to brief you and your staff on our detailed findings at another time. In addition to the quantitative analysis for this audit, CCE also did a significant amount of qualitative research on behalf of ODCA for the SUD project. We interviewed more than 100 stakeholders, including agency staff, providers, clients, and other experts, surveyed local care providers, analyzed DC law and policies, and evaluated relevant DBH and DOC programs. From this analysis, we were able to highlight both the district's successes and challenges addressing the treatment needs of people who are involved in the criminal justice system, and ultimately offered more than 50 specific recommendations. CCE made several recommendations in the report aimed at better health and reduced incarcerations. These included making pre-arrest diversion pathways more robust in order to keep people with SUDs out of jail, developing jail entry procedures to identify more people with SUDs, expanding SUD treatment in the DC jail, and ensuring people get connected to treatment when leaving the jail. The report also made recommendations for behavioral health and criminal justice agencies to regularly share information about SUD services and consumers between agencies, set public benchmarks for improved outcomes for this client population, and improve communications with providers and the public. Fortunately, the DC Auditor's work helps spark concrete action in the district. Already, there have been changes at both DBH and DOC that reflect movement in the right direction, and both agencies are starting to implement many of the recommendations made in this FY 2020 audit. We are proud to have been part of supporting, or in some cases, sparking those changes that we believe will help serve our residents and community better. Finally, I know that ODCA and CCE remain committed to seeing these recommendations become a reality in the District of Columbia and not simply sit on a page in an audit report. For that reason, we are grateful that the Office of the District of Columbia Auditor exists and that it helps supporting the oversight function of this council. We appreciate ODCA's efforts to address timely issues and produce reports and examinations that are important to the public. CCE looks forward to continuing to work collaboratively with the DC Auditor in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McClone. I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I don't have a copy of your statement. You may have submitted it and I just didn't get it, or maybe you didn't submit it.
I will be happy, Chairman Mendelson, to confirm that it was submitted. I'm highly confident that CCE's staff made every effort to submit it. If it didn't get to your hands, I'm not sure why that may be, but we're happy to confirm that it is before the council.
Right, that would be helpful.
Yes.
I appreciate that. I don't have any questions for you, but I appreciate your testimony and your taking the time to come here. So let me turn now to the auditor. So thank you again, Mr. McClone.
You're welcome.
Kathy Patterson. In the good old days, I would see you walking up to the witness table and.
It's a new day, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. We'll see.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kathy Patterson. I'm pleased to serve as the DC Auditor. And it's always a privilege to have the opportunity to talk about the work of the office before this committee. I'll cover three areas in my testimony today: ODCA's performance during a pandemic year, the particular challenge of a legislative audit shop in making recommendations to the legislature itself, and the committee's two policy recommendations made last year. On Thursday, March 12 of last year, the day before Friday the 13th, I instructed all ODCA staff to take their laptops home that day and every day until further notice, so that we had maximum flexibility if and when it became necessary to work from home. In that message, I continued, depending on how widespread COVID-19 becomes in the district, it is possible that the government will move to mandatory teleworking. The following day, I instituted a liberal telework policy, sent everyone home who had come in that day. And of course, by Monday, liberal telework had become mandatory. Since that weekend, I am pleased to report that we've worked almost entirely remotely, and I believe my staff, like so many others in the district government, have performed exceptionally well. I would like to share some of the steps we took and policies we implemented to help enable a staff of roughly 30 individuals continue to perform their role as accountability agents on behalf of district residents, visitors, and taxpayers. Between March a year ago and today, we've published 21 reports, slightly more than the average number of reports we typically publish in a year. We began a series of reports based on the circumstances of the pandemic, starting with an overview of the 4 bills Congress enacted in spring 2020 to provide relief to Americans suffering not only from the pandemic, but the effects of closures and a damaged economy. We've published 6 COVID special reports since that time, and the links to those reports are in my prepared text. The first last May covered all of the federal funding streams made available to the District of Columbia in the CARES Act. We will be publishing 2 additional COVID-19 related reports in the next few months. One is part of a multi-state effort on data collection and accessibility, and another is on policies implemented during the health emergency. And we're considering additional topics that might be covered in a short turnaround time. Because I serve as the personnel authority for ODCA, an independent agency, I was able to take several steps in the human resources arena over the past year in response to the health emergency. At the end of March, and recognizing that we were likely to be working remotely for many months, we implemented a program permitting staff to take home ODCA equipment in addition to their laptops to better enable auditors and analysts to work from home. Second monitors in particular were in demand as staff work consistently with research data and report drafts have a need to toggle back and forth between the two. We inventoried the equipment and arranged for staff to pick things up at the front door to our building while staying in their cars. Our IT staff and my chief of staff put this drive-through pickup project into effect the first week in April. Also at that time, I learned that the Government Accountability Office, which is the lodestar for public sector auditors, had implemented a policy providing a modest amount of paid administrative leave in support of staff with particular family or healthcare pressures resulting from the pandemic. I was asked if I would implement something similar, and we did. I let staff know that if they were caring for children at home because their schools or childcare centers were closed, or if they were caring for family members because of closures or had other personal needs due to the coronavirus, they could take up to 20 hours of paid leave per pay period. The policy makes clear that it is relying on individual judgment and discretion. As indicated in the performance responses we provided last week, a total of 24 staff members have taken a total of 1,473 hours of what we are calling informally COVID paid leave in FY20, and 14 employees have taken a total of 960 hours in FY21 as of a week ago. A majority of the hours have in fact been recorded by staff who are parents of young children who have been at home for the duration of the pandemic. But administrative leave time has also been taken by others as well for personal and health reasons, and we have been mindful of privacy concerns in asking individuals to use their own judgment and discretion. While this policy was implemented as a benefit for valued staff to help them balance work and personal life during what we hope is a once-in-a-lifetime event, I also saw it as a way to promote their productivity, and frankly, it has paid off in that way. ODCA has not missed a beat in turning out what I believe are strong, useful audits. I've shared this approach in monthly calls with other state auditors as we've shared personnel policies designed to support staff during challenging times. We also set up a weekly conference call on Microsoft Teams for staff who wanted to share their strategies on working from home. We call the work weekly sessions telework in the time of coronavirus, and members of the team were appreciative. A handful of staff attended for several months, and we dispensed with these weekly calls late last year. We've taken other steps to boost morale, including a selfie challenge, and the results of which are on our website, the photos. And we also conducted a virtual scavenger hunt and several Friday virtual lunches as goodbye events for a handful of ODCA staff. In early May, we surveyed staff on their thoughts on what a new normal would look like and discussed ideas at a May virtual staff meeting. Asked how likely they were to be comfortable returning to the office when the mayor determines it's time to reopen, a clear majority at that time said they were unlikely were very unlikely to be comfortable with a return to the office. Fully 75% they were unlikely or very unlikely to be comfortable using public transportation. They volunteered many suggestions for making the office a safer environment when we do return. Based on the survey, our discussion, and additional research, we issued COVID-19 health emergency office policies in draft and then final form effective last June 2nd. This included use of masks in common areas and ODCA providing surgical masks and a host of other specific policies for anyone who did want to work in the office rather than teleworking. Our receptionist now goes in on Wednesdays to check mail and receive deliveries. Our IT staff are in the office at least weekly to update our IT systems. And we've also raised health and safety concerns with our building management and then shared their responses onto a specific set of questions like replacement of HVAC filters and other health policy concerns. We had our first colleague at ODCA test positive for the virus in mid-May. Luckily, it was a mild case and she recovered quickly. With her permission, because this is all new territory for us, I shared the information with the staff and we forwarded a get well package. In September, we required staff to return their laptops to the office for a day as part of a major server transition we undertook in partnership with the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. And again, we had a car drop off so if people didn't need to have close personal contact. And we've also amended these pandemic policies to permit staff who have a personal printer at home and doing ODCA work with it to request reimbursement for printer ink. A final office policy pertains to our annual staff evaluations and relates to one of the committee's questions. My deputy auditor, Julie Leibovitz, and I developed a plan for an abbreviated evaluation process while preserving both self-evaluations and supervisor evaluations on meeting performance and agreed on evaluation ratings for our staff. We have 3 rating levels: needs improvement, valued performer, and role model. A staff member receiving a role model designation becomes eligible for a performance bonus. We concluded that each staff member other than the 2 of us would receive the role model designation for 2020 because the team's performance had been outstanding. In an email message, we wrote that the ODCA staff, quote, think they are essential workers and they're providing some of the best work ever. We gave each employee a $1,000 bonus in recognition of this extraordinary work performed during the pandemic year. In addition to the COVID-19 reports we have issued, we've published audits on settlements and judgments in the district, enforcement of the district's lead paint laws, substance abuse disorders among individuals in the justice system, as Mr. McGlone described, and a companion report to that one that was a case study of an individual Washington resident who suffered from a substance abuse disorder. Also, a legislative review of the 2008 Clean and Affordable Energy Act and an audit of the effectiveness of the city's policies giving great weight to ANCs. I've appended to my testimony the quarterly reports we typically send the council summarizing these and all of the other reports we issued in FY20, plus press accounts and testimony provided for the fiscal year. As I noted in the pre-hearing responses we submitted, we're reassessing and will be revamping our performance reporting based on the belief that the key performance indicators we had developed several years ago are not fully reflective of the work and not really sufficiently informative for you or the public. One that we will adapt is recommendation compliance. The heart of our work is the policy and practice change we hope will happen based on our audits. The recommendation compliance report we issued a few weeks ago showed that some 60% of our report recommendations are either in progress or implemented. But we discovered last year, and this was repeated again in our recent calculations, that the part of the district government to whom we had directed the most recommendations that have not been adopted or implemented was the Council of the District of Columbia. ODCA reports have made a wide range of recommendations to the Council, from what are modest amendments to current program law to major change in the way the government does business. While some of these represent substantive amendments, others are to clarify legislative intent and correct ambiguities or issues that have surfaced that are open to interpretation in the laws presently constructed. And I'd like to share just a sampling of these reports, one from each of the last several years. In 2016, we did a report on contracting out school food services and found that the benefits of privatization had simply not been realized. We also reported on other major urban systems that had contracted out this service and then brought it back in-house after bad experiences with both cost and quality. We had recommended that the transition be made here back to a self-operated food service program, as was done in Philadelphia, Detroit, and New Haven. This report had been requested by the council following certain concerns witnesses raised in public hearings. And although there have been council members who indicated their strong support for this transition back to self-operated service, we have not seen that action taken by the council in the time since we issued the report. In 2017, we published one of our school modernization reports was entitled, "The Department of General Services Needs Guidance and Assistance to Develop Effective Internal Control." We found that DGS does not have enough processes to detect or correct violations of the Davis-Bacon Act, which is the federal law requiring prevailing wage rates on construction projects in DC. The report described a very limited role that the district's Department of Employment Services plays in monitoring projects for compliance. And we recommended a local law, enactment of a district law with implementation guidelines for district compliance with and enforcement of the wage law. Other states, including Maryland, have their own prevailing wage laws that are overseen and enforced by their own state labor department. And we recommended similar local law, making clear what are clearly that they are the responsibilities of DOES, but making that clear and spelling it out in district law. A 2018 report that we worked on with you and your staff, Mr. Chairman, was called Housing Code Enforcement, a Case Study of Dahlgreen Courts. And you had a hearing on this topic. We directed 15 of 21 recommendations to the council, as I said in my testimony then, to remove agency discretion by mandating certain specific steps that could result in more effective enforcement. Another report in 2019 had to do with special purpose revenue funds, and we detailed the significant proliferation of these funds with 3 out of 8 recommendations directed to the council. Most importantly, we urged the council to require an explicit statement of why each fund was needed for the efficient operation of the district government. We also recommended a sunset law so that these funds be repealed if there's no justification. And just last November, we published an audit on enforcement of the district standards on lead-based paint. We documented a difference of opinion between our legal review of the law and that by the Department of Energy and the Environment on DOEE's ability to enforce local lead laws in DC Housing Authority properties. And we determined that with the ambiguity here, we recommended that the DC Council expand the definition and clarify that owner includes the district government and its independent agencies like DCHA. I share these examples of recommendations that we've made to the council to highlight why we are reconsidering our performance metrics and the very fundamental reasons we're engaged in a strategic planning process. We'll be considering a range of potential actions to try to improve the likelihood that our audits and recommendations lead to change in policy and practice. And we want to continually work with auditees in order to come to consensus as we produce recommendations. Because agreement by the audited agency obviously is the best thing for us, because then they will go ahead and take action on the recommendations. And where we have directed recommendations to the council, such as the examples I've provided, we're considering steps such as offering testimony during performance and budget hearings to amplify and repeat these recommendations, and potentially adding staff to work more closely with the council. There may be other initiatives that we undertake once we've completed a strategic planning process. And I welcome the input of the committee if you have thoughts for us on this challenge. In the budget report a year ago, the committee made reference to our need for new leased space. And you had hoped, Mr. Chairman, as had I, that we would find space in the Wilson building, but that wasn't possible. And in November, we identified the building at 1331 Pennsylvania Avenue, directly across Freedom Plaza from the Wilson building. That will be our new location at some point in this calendar year. But we learned just last week that the Department of General Services from the real estate team that there might be a delay beyond our lease expiration, and it may prove necessary to negotiate an extension, which I would anticipate is likely to be expensive. The lease provides that any extension would cost 1.5 times the lease rate per square foot. We selected the location, which was the lowest cost option we reviewed in November. We learned last week that nearly 4 months later, DGS has not yet completed a letter of intent with a new building location. And we were informed that this was due to the pandemic. I just wanted to bring you up to date on that. We do anticipate being closer to the council once we're able to move. A second policy recommendation included last year was one that I'm particularly grateful for. The committee moved forward with legislation to create an audit engagement fund that is proving very useful to our planning, as we have undertaken additional and relatively expensive contract audits over the past year. The fund permits ODCA to carry over funds not spent in a prior fiscal year, which means we can plan more effectively for contract audits that extend beyond a single year. And I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and that of your committee director, Mr. Cash, for this step forward. That concludes my prepared statement, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Let me ask you about this, the DGS and the lease for 1331. So is that finally moving forward, or?
Yes, they've assured us it's moving forward. There's apparently been a change in the architect working on the build out, and we have a meeting set up with them for next week.
And when is your lease up at?
It's up at the end of July.
End of July. And has DGS said that they will not be able to do the new lease or do the build out before then?
I'm sorry, what?
Has DGS said that they will not be able to get the new lease?
They're worried that they won't be able to meet that timeline. We don't have anything definitive just yet. We're really just talking about contingencies if it looks like we're not going to make that July time. They wondered if we might be able to work entirely remotely for a period of time. And I explained that we would not be able to do that, that we actually produce a product, which is our reports. At least one of our readers, yourself, prefers hard copy. We do need to continue producing actual copies of reports. So we actually do need a physical location, even if we're not all working there.
You also, in your statement, said you'll be publishing 2 additional COVID-19 related reports in the next few months. Can you say more about those 2 reports?
Sure. One we've already released, well, both of them we've released earlier, not iterations of the same report, but they're in a series. One is a multi-state review that we're working on with the state of Delaware and I think 12 other states with a similar set of questions looking at what health data is gathered, how it's defined, and then how it's shared with the public. And it's sort of a data quality, data accessibility, data definition review that we're working on in conjunction with other state auditors so that we'll be able to say at the end of the day, here's what the district produced, here's what the data looked like, here's how it was defined, here's how it was shared with the public, and then compare those across states. It will be a bit of we hope it will have national implications in terms of what was different state to state and how, frankly, how this might be done better going forward in the future. That would be very helpful, I would hope, if we see another variant, if we see another pandemic, or if we see other national emergencies of any kind, to sort of look at how states have done their information sharing with the public. So that's one that we'll have a final report on. We issued an initial report in the fall looking at the Department of Health and the way in which the Department of Health was gathering information, and that's, I believe, summarized in the attachment to my testimony. And that found one of the things that was very useful in that report is that as we were finding other, perhaps better ways of defining terms for the benefit of the public, the Department of Health was sort of staying a step ahead of us. We were in communication with them, so we were able to share, how Delaware, some other state was doing something, and it was a kind of an iterative process that was a very constructive and useful one, I think. So that's one report that will be coming out. The other one is being done by a team of consultants that we hired called Talus Analytics, and they're looking at policies implemented during COVID-19 and how they have impacted across the national capital region. So looking at Maryland, looking at the district, looking at Virginia. And one of the early reports that we put out on that just a short time ago looked at the issue of mobility and looked at the impact of the closures and the essentially shutting down of businesses across the DMV and found where there was the greatest level of mobility and the least amount of mobility, really confirming through cell phone data that the individuals in the district most heavily impacted for the longest period of time by the pandemic have been folks living in wards 5, 7, and 8, folks who tend to have jobs that may require them to be on site, not so much white collar folks who can work from home. So it was a report, there was an early review of the final report that the consultants will be producing for us, but looking very specifically at the issue of mobility. And one of the features of this work is being able to use the database that the consultants have developed of policies implemented all across the country. So it's not just looking at the district, Maryland, Virginia, but looking at policies implemented here and how they compare nationally. And one of the things that I think we'll find when we issue that final report is that the District of Columbia, in a lot of the metrics that are being looked at in terms of implementation of policies, impact of those policies, and then some of the health metrics, I think will show in most categories, the district is in the top tier of states in terms of performance. So I think that, I mean, I don't have any of the final details on that analysis, but I think it's going to be one of those reports that we put out that is better news rather than worse news.
Give me just a. Thank you. Let me move to some other questions. You had significant salary lapse both in FY19 and FY20. Why?
I'm not sure I can answer the question as to 19. As to 20, we always have staff, some turnover with our staff. But in 20, we didn't hire. I was a little bit leery about doing interviews virtually. But since this has all gone on for so long, we have now started interviewing and we've made a couple of hires. So that's one of the reasons for the lapse in 20. I'd have to go back and take a closer look at 19. One of the things that is a persistent challenge for us is, frankly, the federal government. They have an awful lot of auditors in the federal government, and we sometimes have lost really good people. I'm happy for them to go to what they'd consider to be better, high-paying jobs, but we've lost a couple of people to the Department of Defense, Office of the Inspector General. We had someone else leave for the Amtrak IG office. So at least of the folks who've left in my time at ODCA, I'd say the biggest proportion are folks that go to federal jobs, which again, this is where the nation's capital. That's, I think, going to be a persistent challenge.
Thank you. I'm going to keep moving along here. My notes here say, in September 2019, you contracted with Bromwich to review MPD training. Was that in 2019 or 2020?
I'm sorry, reviewed what?
Contracted with the Bromwich Group to review MPD training practices and policies.
Oh, I'm sorry, that should have been a more specific description. Mr. Bromwich and his team are looking at officer-involved fatalities in 2018, 2019, and 2020. And the contract was signed in calendar 2020. We signed that contract late summer, I believe, last year. And that's work that is underway right now. We're going to have a report coming out probably in the next several weeks, looking at 4 officer-involved fatalities, their case studies, 3 in 2018 and 4 in 2018 and 2019. And that report and those case studies will come out as one report. They're continuing to look at 2 officer-involved fatalities from 2020 that we were asked to look at by the Police Reform Commission, who were aware that we were doing the case studies of the 18 and 19 cases. And then when the Police Reform Commission began meeting, they asked us if we could add the additional later cases. And what their request was, more specifically, was to do something that would be almost a real-time review And what we've negotiated with the police department, first with our departed chief, and now with Acting Chief Conti, is to be able to participate to some extent as the investigations in those two cases go forward. And that'll either be a second report or a second and third report. We may issue one each as an individual case study, and those will be sometime later this year.
Now, the Police Reform Commission is coming out with its recommendations at the end of this month. Will your report, the one on the 4 cases from 2018 and 2019, precede or follow the police?
I believe it will precede, because I'm hoping we have that report issued before the confirmation hearing of Chief Conti, which is, I believe, the 25th. So we're shooting to get that report out the week before the confirmation hearing. And we've been in touch with the Police Reform Commission and have sort of talked about what the recommendations in our report are likely to look like, and whether they might, and we would hope that there would be some consistency between the two efforts.
Now, as I said, you contracted this out, and I think in your testimony, you've talked about some other audits that you've contracted out. What are your thoughts about building internal capacity to conduct more regular audits?
One of the things that I have been working toward is a rebalancing where we're doing a bit more in the way of contract audits. And my thinking on that is that we are in the nation's capital. We are in a community where there is expertise in virtually every topic. And from issue to issue, it may make sense, and we may be able to produce a better product for the residents of the district and for the council by using that expertise. So, for example, the audit that we have just underway now of the Office of Unified Communication and the 911 system, we went through a competitive RFP process on that in the fall. And the firm that we have hired have a lot of folks who have run call centers, who have worked in fire and police departments across the country, who have done a great deal of work in this very specific issue area. So contracting with them and spending taxpayer dollars for those contracts, I think brings us a level of expertise that we really don't have the ability to build within an office of 25 to 30 people. One thing we've also discussed and will be part of our strategic planning discussion is whether there are 1 or 2 issues where we can develop issue expertise and develop subject matter experts. We're sort of experimenting with that in partnership with the council in having hired an education research policy expert when we were working with you and your committee on the research practice partnership legislation. And we found that to be a very useful thing to have someone on staff who is both an education policy expert, but also a data expert. And we're in our strategic planning process, we're looking at whether there are 1 or 2 other topic areas where we could have subject matter expertise within the ODCA staff, so that we can have a blend of sort of journeyman auditors who can take on any subject, then a few subject matter experts, and then some of the more highly technical work and subjects that we get into being contract audits.
Line that you see a value to a mix of in-house expertise and outside tapping that expertise.
Yes, and just trying to find a good balance among those different approaches.
You still have an MOU with OSSI to work on your audit on school enrollment projections.
Right.
2 reports have been released already. Do you
Right.
do a 3rd audit or report?
One of the issues that came up in our conversations with the education cluster and the work we're doing in the education space involving education data has to do with the length of time that we need to have these in place. And one of the things that we have argued successfully is we need to have some level of accessibility to data 3 years after the publication of a report. We go through a peer review, a triennial peer review every 3 years. And so if the peer reviewers looked at our body of audits put out in the period of time that they're reviewing, and they selected one for review that involved some of this data that we're speaking of, we would want to be able ourselves to access to answer any questions that they might have. So what we have arranged to do is to have, for the enrollment audit, that work is over with. We published the 2 reports, but the MOU itself will extend to cover the possibility of our peer review wanting to look at one of those reports. And the same will be true with the report that we issued yesterday, that will have a long sort of tail on that MOU, if you will, to extend beyond the timeline of the actual publication.
The MOU regarding the enrollment projections has been extended 5 times.
Right.
It seems, why wasn't it, this sounds more critical than I mean it to be, but why wasn't it gotten right the first time?
We typically ask for longer time, and the administration has typically demanded shorter time, even if it meant going back. So it basically has been their preference to give us as short a, sort of keep us on as short a leash as possible, even if it means having to go back and negotiate the extended period of time. What we have discussed, and I hope productively, although the main attorney we were working with has now left the government, it's left OSSI, but what we were hoping for was to come up with a template MOU that would cover all the territory, and the people would be familiar with it and not be sort of scared off and wanting to give us 3 months when what we need is 3 years. We would rather start with longer and need less time, but that's not the situation we found ourselves in negotiating with our executive branch partners.
Now, the education data audit was, how much of that was done in-house and how much was contracted out? I know you contracted with data ethics to review
Yes.
for privacy purposes, but was the rest of it in-house?
The bulk of the work was done by well, it actually became a 3-person team, 2 data ethics staff and Ms. Roth on my staff. So the 3 of them worked in partnership on that project. She was essentially managing the consultant, but also working with them. So for example, the interviews that were done at OSSI, she knew some of the players there, so she tended to lead those interviews, although the 3 would have been in attendance, just typically.
And related to the data audit, you have a $57,000 contract for public engagement?
Yes.
Can you explain that? And you don't typically do that with...
No, it's my first time in 6.5 years, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Explain it.
Yes.
You will recall that when I first took this job, there was nearing completion the summative evaluation of the Public Education Reform Amendment Act by the National Academy of Sciences. That was a major undertaking that cost probably, I believe I had to answer a press question at the time, that cost something like $2 million. Office of the District of Columbia Audit managed that for the council. So we didn't have any input into the content, but we we were the administrative manager for that contract with the National Academy, and so worked with them on the release of that report. That report was a very deep, broad dive on education in the District of Columbia, looking at the period of time from the mayoral control legislation in 2007 through roughly 2014. It was published in 2015. National experts, the former head of schools in Long Beach, a professor at one of the University of California campuses were the co-chairs. It was a star-studded group of folks and a very deep dive. National Academy does peer reviews. It's a very serious operation. That report had a number of very significant findings. One of the major findings had to do with data, and found that the District of Columbia, again, this is published in 2015, that we were not collecting the kind of data we needed, that we were certainly not making the data available and accessible. That team from the National Academy had very little accessibility to the data. And one of the things they recommended was the kind of deeper dive that we have just done and just published. That report, in my view, Mr. Chairman, was a very good piece of work that went on a shelf. And these issues are serious and important issues. We've spent a considerable amount of district tax dollars on this education data audit, and I didn't want this report to simply go on a shelf. And so I contracted with a public affairs firm with expertise in education to work with us on the outreach on this report. And they'll be working with us for another month or maybe two in terms of making sure that we're able to share the information in this report as broadly as possible.
Is the $57,000 a fixed cost or is that a ceiling?
That's an up to.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for you. We do have a hearing on the data audit. I believe it's March 18th.
I heard you say what other hearing you had that day, Mr. Chairman. Is there any hope that that will actually start at 3 o'clock? That's a rhetorical question. You don't need to answer. Just know that it's on my mind after hearing you describe that same day you're looking at DCRA and a couple of other major operations.
Well, as you
So
know,
yes, we're looking forward to the hearing.
yes, as you know, there are no issues with DCRA. We'll see.
Okay.
Good
Good luck to all of us. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity today. Thank you.
very much. So we're going to turn now to the Office of Budget and Planning, which is within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and the witness is Eric Kennedy, who's the Deputy Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Kennedy, good afternoon. You are muted.
Okay, how's that? Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson.
Good afternoon. Let me begin by welcoming you and congratulating you for being the new Office of Budget and Planning Director.
Thank you, sir.
You will learn to regret it, but actually you've been around working with the council for a few years, so you know exactly what you're into.
Yes, sir.
We are. How wonderful we are when we have the budget.
Great. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I can't walk upstairs right now, but it's okay.
Okay, I assume that's the wallpaper in your house?
Yes, absolutely. It's CFO.
Okay, well, why don't you begin?
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of Whole. I am Eric Kennedy, Deputy CFO or Chief Financial Officer for the Office of Budget and Planning, or OBP, within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I am here today to testify on the FY 2020 performance and FY 2021 plans of OBP. I am honored to appear today and present testimony on the accomplishments of my office and our plans for improving OBP's performance and the services we offer to residents and district agencies. With me today is James Spalding, Associate Deputy Chief Financial Officer for OBP. I will cover the following areas in my remarks: fiscal years 2020 and 2021 operating expenditures, FY 2020 performance, and FY 2021 operational goals. Fiscal years 2020 and 2021 operating expenditures. OBP is one of the key programs within the OCFO. In FY 2020, OBP operated within its local funds revised budget of $5.633 million, spending $5.606 million, or more than 99.5% of our available local funds. Through the 26th of January 2021, we have expended and obligated $1.824 million, or 28.8% of our FY 2021 approved budget of $6.326 million. We expect to end the year within our current budget. In the area of performance in FY 2020, our major accomplishments for FY 2020 were in 3 areas: development of the FY 2020 budget revisions and the FY 2021 budget. During FY 2020, the district made many changes to its budget. And despite having to telework due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we successfully processed these changes and tracked and reported on the budget throughout the year. We also worked with the mayor and the council to produce a supplemental budget for FY 2020. The district ended FY 2020 with a balanced budget. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and precipitous drop in revenues, the timeline for the mayor's budget submission was delayed from March to May. OBP worked closely with Mayor Bowser and her budget staff to develop the FY 2021 budget and submit it to council on May 30th, 2020. Between June and August, we worked closely with the council staff to review the budget, and the council passed the district's budget, which was transmitted to Congress on August 27th. In the area of budget execution, I will now discuss our key budget execution tools. Financial review process. District agencies prepare and submit monthly financial review process reports, or FRPs, to OBP for review and analysis. We use the FRP to analyze agency projected year-end expenditures and revenue collections and compare them to agency budgets. If agencies report spending pressures, we work with the mayor's budget office as they propose changes to resolve the pressures. Reprogrammings. In FY 2020, we worked closely with the agency fiscal officers and the executive office of the mayor to process a total of 193 operating and capital reprogramming requests. Grants management. OBP is the district's central unit responsible for reviewing and approving all requests from agencies to establish and/or modify grant budget authority. In FY 2020, OBP processed 663 grant budget modifications, of which 240 required passel approval by the council. Reports. During FY 2020, OBP produced monthly financial status reports on operating budget spending and quarterly reports on capital budget spending, in addition to a variety of reports on such topics as reprogrammings, the emergency and contingency reserve funds, capital project reconciliations and transfers, and capital funded FTEs. In FY 2020, we produced 52 reports. We published 48, and the remaining 4 were prepared on behalf of the mayor for transmittal to Congress. As we have discussed in prior testimonies, the OCFO's website also includes CFO Info, a web-based application allowing the public to see, among other data, current year operating financial status report data. Federal grant budget and expenditure information and capital project data are also available to the public through CFO Info. Budget process improvements. We continue to improve budget processes and management. OBP implemented a paperless review process, the Automated Budget Chapter System, or ABC, for budget chapters, which we are using to prepare the FY 2022 budget books. We expanded the ABC system to include a financial plan module and an automated process of uploading performance plans from the Office of Budget and Performance Management, or OBPM's quick-based system. ABC has dramatically reduced the time it takes to develop agency budget chapters, which are found in the budget book. On the capital side, we formally closed 40 Federal Highway Trust Fund, HTF projects, and 1 local transportation project, moving a total budget of more than $18.9 million back to the HTF master projects and $36.9 thousand back to the local master projects. OBP has expanded the Capital Asset Replacement System, or CARS, to include room for inventory for the DC Housing Authority. Over 316,000 district capital assets are now in CARS. In FY 2021, some of our key program goals and initiatives include, in FY 2021, we plan to continue to build on our success and meeting the Chief Financial Officer's strategic objective of creating a climate of continuous improvement. OBP's key operational goals are as follows. Work with the mayor and the council to develop a balanced budget and financial plan for FY 2022. Work closely with the OCFO's Office of the Chief Information Officer, and the team implementing the district's integrated financial system, or DIFS, as they develop the new Oracle-based budget system that will integrate with the core financial system within DIFS. Continue to ensure the timely development, review, and submission of RFPs. Continue to manage and improve the use of JIRA, which is a system to manage and track reprogrammings. The automated system has improved the former reprogramming process by reducing the time it takes to process these actions, increasing transparency of the status of these actions, and eliminating or significantly reducing the year-end flurry of large number of these actions. Before the end of FY 2021, OBP intends to add multiple new budget execution processes, such as the review of intra-district requests to JIRA. Continue to manage the spending pressure task force in order to quickly identify emerging spending pressures and work collaboratively with OBPM to develop effective gap closing plans. Continue to improve capital budget management and oversight by ensuring the FY 2022 through FY 2027 capital improvement plan remains within the 12% debt cap, and continue to provide budget transparency through the CFO info application. In conclusion, currently OBP staff is working with OBPM to develop the proposed FY 2022 budget and financial plan for transmittal to the council on April 22nd. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the entire OBP team for their hard work and professionalism over the past year. We look forward to working with the council and other policymakers during the consensus process to develop a transparent and balanced budget for FY 2022. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks. I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Spalding. I do have a few questions. With the capital asset system, replacement system CARS, does that now include all district government assets?
That includes all district government assets. We are in the process of adding, as I said in my testimony, we are in the process of adding the WMATA and the Housing Authority assets.
Who was the first one you said? It sounded like you said NADA.
I'm sorry, WMATA.
WMATA. So Housing Authority is not completely in CARS yet?
No, we've made room for it to go into CARS, but we hope to have the assets in before the end of the fiscal year or by the end of the fiscal years or fiscal year.
And WMATA is not in it either?
No, we're in the process of adding them as well.
Now, what is a WMATA asset? Is that a bus stop or a bus, for example?
I suspect if it's whatever is considered an asset would be included in our system. So that could be if we consider that an asset.
But a bus would not be a district government asset. A bus stop might be.
Right. I'm not 100% sure what that will entail. If you want me to get back to you, I can.
Yeah, when you have a chance, yes, please.
Okay, will do.
I know that last year, the year before, our budget office did back of the envelope calculation on the replacement cost for a school and looked at cars and found that the valuation in cars seemed to be way inflated. Do you remember this?
I sort of remember it, but if you recall, at that time, I was the operating budget director, so I might not have been directly involved in it. I would say that system in general is used to inform policymakers' decisions. I can't speak directly to the calculation or the scoring, but if you want something from us to speak to that, I can do that. I can get you that. Or is there a different question?
Well, maybe it's better to wait until we have the budget before us, but I think it's worth you looking into. As I recall, this came up with regard to, I'm going to say Banneker, and how much it costs to build a new Banneker and how much it costs to rehab the old Banneker. And we thought it should be one amount. And I think we just had a ballpark because we weren't able to fund it completely. And what suggested was a much higher amount.
So what I can do is, since you want to wait for us to deliver the budget to you, I can restart that conversation with your budget director after we deliver the capital budget.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I'm easy on that. You touched on this. OCFO continues its journey to create a new district-wide financial system. The new system is to be called DIFS.
Yes, sir.
Integrated Financial System.
Yes.
Is that system complete? You were talking about moving some stuff into JIRA, which I'm guessing is a different system.
That's completely different. JIRA is specifically a software application that that's housed within, or it's a cloud-based application, but it has nothing to do with DIFS. The DIFS project would include a new SOAR replacement system and a new budget system.
So
ultimately, DIFS might cause JIRA to go away, but we don't know yet.
So is DIFS completed?
No.
It's partially completed.
It's in the process of completion.
So are you using it this year for the budget?
No, sir. We are using the budget formulation application.
So, and I think you testified to that. So when will DIFS be completed?
I don't have the exact timeline. I know that we've had to make some, or the OCFO in general has had to make some different decisions about the rollout of which parts of DIF would be completed first. And I believe at this stage, the new SOAR replacement system is the next piece up. And I think that's slated, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's slated for 22, 23. And then we would be looking to add the budget component to the budget system to it. So I'm just told by my staff that the SOAR replacement should occur by 2023.
Okay. Grant budget modification. So we reduced the time for council review from, I believe, 14 days to 2 days for COVID-related grant budget modifications. But you're unable to distinguish between a COVID-related and a non-COVID-related grant budget modification. Am I right?
We have made the distinction. So we set up an infrastructure so that when a grant budget modification comes to us that's COVID related, it's flagged. The people who submit through our grant budget modification system, they specifically tell us that it's COVID related. And what we do is we put that in the track that the council was so gracious to develop so they could get processed in that 2-day passive approval process. So well,
I'm told that all of them come over with a 2-day extension. I mean, a 2-day review period.
When you say all of them, you mean all the grants, non-COVID and COVID?
Correct. All the grant budget modifications, correct.
No, we segregate them. That happens in my office. We transmit them to OPLA, and then OPLA transmits them to you, but they are segregated. When they come to us, they're segregated by COVID or non-COVID related.
Well, maybe what happens is that OPLA unsegregates them. 'Cause what
I don't know.
I'm told, we went through this last week with the extension, the emergency extension,
Okay.
getting 2 days.
Okay. I can follow up just to figure out where that is, but we do segregate them.
When you follow up, would you include Jen Budoff?
I will.
Has the expedited schedule had any beneficial effect on how you process these grant budget modifications?
So the great news is that the OCFO's IT department, we had started building an IT infrastructure before the pandemic to allow us to work from home. And while the staff have done an amazing job, given that, it kind of took everyone by surprise. We've had a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, we found a rhythm, and I think it's going well.
Okay. Did I hear you testify? You did say that the new systems you have in place enable you to prepare the budget chapters, agency budget chapters more quickly.
Yes.
But have improvements been made to enable you to more quickly compile the financial plan?
Yes. So the financial plan is part of that system. And so now, unlike in the past, when we use multiple spreadsheets, we have a database that is the financial plan that's connected to our expenditure database that downloads the data and it's able to extrapolate it into a plan much quicker. But again, the process outside of data aggregation still requires that we do analysis, still requires that we vet revenue numbers prior to them coming into the system. So some parts of this, so we've seen a lot of improvements with respect to aggregating data, but we still are we're still making improvements on the coordination of getting that data.
You've worked with the council and the budget for many years. Is there anything that comes to mind that we can do, whether that's the council or your office, to improve that process the last week or so with the budget?
So I first want to, and I've said this directly to Jen and her staff, I want to commend that office and the council for the way that we have progressed our collaborative relationship in the last few years. We have seen an incredible amount of progress and improvements over the year. The system that your budget office is currently using allows us to get the data exactly the way that we need it. I think that, for example, this past fiscal year, while I think everyone involved did an outstanding job, but it was a new environment for everyone. It was a virtual environment. And so I would say that now that we've got about a year under our belt, let's see what this year brings. I think we're gonna see all of the improvements that you made on your side, the improvements we made on our side, we're gonna see those bear fruit this year, because we both now have the experience of working from home.
Okay. Good, that sounds good. My last question is, does the Board of Anti-Deficiency Review come under you or elsewhere in the OCFO?
Elsewhere, it does not come under me.
Do you know who?
Jim? Jim, I
Yes,
think.
the board is currently chaired by Chief of Staff for the OCFO, Angel Jacobs. Includes representatives from council and the mayor, but it's chaired by the Chief of Staff.
Okay. I do not have any other questions for you. Thank you very much. I think we'll see you again at the budget hearing.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thanks to both of you. So you're excused, and we're going to turn now to the District of Columbia Retirement Board. I have two witnesses listed, Lyle Blanchard, who's a board member, a council appointee to the Retirement Board, and Karen Sue, who is the acting executive director.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So how do you want to,
I'm going to give a quick introductory statement and then turn it over to Ms. Sue, or Shu, actually. So good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. I am Lyle Blanchard, the council appointed trustee, one of the two council appointed trustees at the moment, to the District Retirement Board. Joe Clark is probably watching, but not testifying today, so I'm testifying on his behalf. He was recently elected to as our chair of the board at our February board meeting. And we're in good hands with Mr. Clark because he's served before as the board chair and has a depth of knowledge and experience that will benefit the board moving forward. I also want to acknowledge any other board members who may not be seen but are definitely watching today's hearing. We want to thank you, Chairman Mendelson, and this committee for your continued support. Although he's not present today, we also want to thank our previous board chair, Gary Hankins, for his leadership over the previous year. The trustees look forward to working with this committee and the council as DCRB fulfills its fiduciary and administrative responsibilities. We're pleased to report that DCRB continues to be fully funded retirement system with the plan's aggregate funding level at 105.1% as of the beginning of the fiscal year, October 1, 2020. The fund that supports the plans, actually the funds, it's singular, plans plural, reached 10.1 billion as of the end of 2020, December 31. And we continue to make progress in our efforts to create a comprehensive retirement system for the fund participants and their beneficiaries. Our acting executive director, Karen Shu, will elaborate upon these numbers and our progress during her testimony. We're also happy to report that during fiscal year 2020, DCRB was among a select number of public systems to receive a Public Pension Coordinating Council's Recognition Award for funding and administration in recognition of meeting professional standards for plan funding and administration as set forth in the public pension standards. And for the 12th consecutive year, DCRB was awarded the Government Finance Officers Association's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for its fiscal year 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. This is the highest form of recognition in the area of governmental accounting and financial reporting. Before I turn over to Karen Shu, I want to thank her for her service. She's only been in this position for a few days, and she's only been with the DCRB for about 4 months. But today is her birthday. So I want to thank her for stepping up and representing the agency today. Ms. Shu will provide you with more detailed information about our fiscal year 2020 accomplishments and our goals for fiscal year 2021 and beyond. Thank you, Chairman Mendelson, and I will be available to answer questions.
thank you. Good afternoon. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Blanchard, and thank you for the birthday wishes. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the Committee of the Whole. I am Karen Shu, Acting Executive Director and Pension Administrator of the District of Columbia Retirement Board. I am pleased to testify on DCRB's fiscal year 2020 performance. With me today are Trustee Blanchard, Mark Spindell, who is our Chief Investment Officer, and Thomas Vicente, who is our Senior Consulting Actuary with Bolton, who serves as the board's independent actuary. Before discussing the mission and priorities of DCRB, I would like to express our thanks and acknowledge the guidance and support provided by our Board of Trustees. Finally, I also want to express my appreciation to this committee and your staff for your assistance over the past year. A brief narrative of DCRB's history and mission is included in the written materials we submitted, and they remain consistent in our responsibilities to the District of Columbia Teachers Retirement Fund and the District of Columbia Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement Fund, which are collectively referred to as the fund. The assets of the fund are held in trust for the sole benefit of the members, including eligible survivors and beneficiaries of the District of Columbia Teachers Retirement Plan and the District of Columbia Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement Plan, which are referred to as the plans. The district government is responsible for funding the benefits earned by members covered under the district replacement plans, which we refer to as the district plans, which were adopted on July 1st, 1997. Additionally, DCRB serves as the third-party administrator for members' retirement benefits, earned through June 30th, 1997 under what are referred to as the frozen plans. Funding for these is the responsibility of the U.S. Department of Treasury. I would like to start today's discussion with an update on the status of the fund and the plans. As of September 30th, 2020, the end of our last fiscal year, there were approximately 27,000 members in the district and or the frozen plans, and approximately 77% of those members are now covered under the district plans or are jointly funded by the district and federal governments. Although the greater portion of benefit payments are still paid by the United States Treasury for accrued annuity benefits under the frozen plans, our former actuary projected that district annuity payments are expected to surpass those of the U.S. Treasury in about 10 years, in around 2031. Per the board's actuarial evaluation report for fiscal year 2020, which was prepared by Bolton, as you heard, the aggregate funded ratio for the district plans was 105.1%. This is a slight decrease from the 105.5% aggregate funded ratio for fiscal year 2019. The individual plan ratios were 92.1% for the teachers plan and 110.8% for the police officers and firefighters plan. Separately, the ratios for those covered groups is 110.4% for police officers and 111.7% for firefighters. As a point of reference, the National Conference on Public Employee Retirement Systems, which is the largest trade association for public sector pension funds, recently reported that the average funded level was 75.1% in 2020, which was up from 72.4% in 2019. As of September 30th, 2020, the fund was valued at $9 billion, an increase of approximately $511 million in total asset value over the previous 12 months. As of December 31st, 2020, the fund value had appreciated to $10.1 billion, an almost 11% gain over the quarter. The rollout of vaccine and the associated economic recovery has boosted the market assets. Now turning to our priorities and goals. DCRB is experiencing an intense level of transition. Although our primary goals remain unchanged from the prior year, the way we execute against them must be fundamentally different. This is not an indictment of our past, our history, or our staff. It is a reality that we must resolve the issues before us in order to move forward successfully. As with any organization experiencing this level of change, one of the most critical activities we undertake is prioritization. Across the disciplines represented at DCRB, we need to ensure that we have a complete leadership team and board, and that we have an appropriate stable of consultants and advisors to support us. These priorities will flow through our 5 major goals. They are all critical, and the order here is not reflective of a hierarchy. First, we aim to refine DCRB's organizational structure to meet changing agency responsibilities and needs. Specific to our priority of assembling a complete leadership team, in fiscal year 2020, we filled 4 key positions in the IT, finance, investment, and benefits departments. Ramurthy joined us as the IT director in October 2019, as did Akiko Kawashima, joined as the controller. Mark Spindell joined us as the Chief Investment Officer in August 2020, and I also joined in August 2020 as the Pension Administrator. In fiscal year 2021, we expect to continue this trend and anticipate filling the Chief Financial Officer position and completing an executive search due to the current Executive Director's retirement. The trustees have concurred that the next Executive Director should have the opportunity to select a Chief Operations Officer or Deputy Director, whose role largely will be to further improve the efficiency and effectiveness of agency operations and provide support to our infrastructure departments, including procurement. Support within each department also must be considered, and we have been making great strides in filling vacancies within those departments. We expect that a strong and robust leadership team will be a benefit not only to each department, but to the agency as a whole, as we work together to fulfill the mission, provide greater alignment between operational activities and strategic initiatives, improve our operations, and be more effective in our daily work. Next, we must safeguard the integrity of the fund. Safeguarding the integrity of the fund is both foundational and an overarching goal. It is a guiding principle underlying almost every decision we make. Every dollar we spend must be the best single use of that dollar, whether we save it, spend it, or invest it. Our operations are complex, and not uniquely, they have become more complex over time. Compliance becomes more challenging with no relief from our obligations to meet those standards. Merely being good isn't enough. We must be able to prove it. This is a key driver of our other top priority, which is to ensure that we have the right advisors. In fiscal year 2021, we will engage a consultant to assist and support us in a robust review of our operations. Specifically, these services will identify organizational areas of strength and weakness in the implementation, administration, and fiduciary oversight of the retirement program. It will compare DCRB's third-party administration and other support operations, including investments and board fiduciary oversight functions, with applicable federal laws, federal and district laws, rules and regulations, industry best practices, as well as the best practices of other similarly situated governmental 401(a) defined benefit plans. It will also provide detailed and actionable recommendations to cure or improve any identified deficiencies. Having a strong partner will ensure that we benefit from the breadth of their perspective and experience and help us to move more quickly to develop and execute a plan of action. We also look to expand and improve benefits administration capabilities to ensure that benefits are paid accurately and timely. We must remain vigilant in our ongoing evaluation and improvement of our benefits administration capabilities and services. This certainly supports accurate and timely benefit payments, but also requires that we consider improvements through the entire participant life cycle. The operational review I mentioned a moment ago reflects the greater context. Key goals for fiscal year 2021 include to examine and refine our service metrics and develop process maps. These activities will assist us in identifying bottlenecks and duplications of effort that impair the overall participant experience. Not only will this be a useful tool for DCRB staff, it will also support more effective collaboration and clear understanding across agencies holding data that feed into that final retirement transaction. To be able to provide benefits, DCRB must prudently invest fund assets to provide long-term, sustainable, risk-adjusted returns. One of DCRB's major ongoing responsibilities is to prudently invest fund assets with the goal of earning a return that meets or exceeds our actual long-term net investment return assumption target currently set at 6.5%. This target is intended to sustain the fund's viability over the long-term investment horizon. From its inception, the fund has generated returns exceeding the current 6.5% long-term actuarial assumed return. For fiscal year 2020, amidst COVID-induced economic and financial market volatility, the one-year net return for fiscal year 2020 was 5.3%, and the strong fourth quarter gains mentioned earlier raised the net calendar year 2020 returns to 10.3%. In fiscal year 2021, we will continue to routinely evaluate investment manager performance against benchmark returns, rebalance the portfolio to maintain compliance with asset allocation targets and ranges, and monitor and evaluate investment manager fees. What we are doing well, we must continue to do well. And where we are lacking, we must improve in short order. We will continue to strengthen our important efforts to identify promising emerging diverse fund managers and engage our partners to evaluate their efforts to promote diversity and inclusion throughout their business operations. Pursuant to the diverse emerging Fund Managers and Reporting Requirements Amendment Act of 2020, DCRB began meeting this reporting standard in its fiscal year 2020 comprehensive annual financial statements. In line with DCRB's overarching top priorities, the board will release an RFP for investment consulting services pursuant to procurement best practices and the evolution of the marketplace for these services. We have had stable relationships in this area historically and also must ensure that these critical services remain competitive and strong. Finally, we continue to foster member and stakeholder trust through enhanced communications and collaborative outreach. Building and maintaining trust is imperative to our effectiveness. It is reflected in how we manage expectations as much as in how well we fulfill them. We know that our participants had a high interest in meeting with us in person, and the global pandemic required us to moderate how we engage. Building on our strides in fiscal year 2020, we will continue to better leverage our website to share timely updates regarding expected and unexpected activities that may be of interest to our stakeholders throughout the year. In addition, our operational projects and service enhancements will invite participant feedback to ensure that we can deliver improvements that are both meaningful and effective. The expectations and consequences for DCRB are clear, and we remain committed to doing the work required to correct our course. Our trustees remain engaged and committed to the agency's mission, and our staff continue to work hard to meet the needs of our members. Together, we continue to move forward in creating a comprehensive retirement system to serve the needs of plan participants and beneficiaries over the long term. In closing, I would like to thank you for your support, the board for its guidance, and the DCRB staff for their hard work. We're happy to answer any questions you may have, and this concludes my prepared testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Shu, and it's nice to meet you.
Thank you.
A little bit surprised that I thought, in fact, your written statement suggests that Sheila Morgan Johnson was retiring but hadn't left quite yet. So this seems a little sudden to me. Can you say what's going on?
Yes, thank you for that question. Ms. Morgan Johnson does have a plan to retire at the end of this month. However, she found herself requiring a period of leave in advance of her retirement. And as per the normal protocol, she has delegated an acting executive director, and that would be me.
And you will be acting for how long?
Through the duration of her absence, which is through planned to be through March 23rd. And then she will retire on the 26th, and then we will have an interim.
So you may not be the executive director after the 23rd?
I will be acting through the 23rd, and then the interim period will start on the 27th of March.
And the board hasn't decided who the interim will be? They have.
I will let our trustee answer. I believe the board has made a determination and is prepared to move forward.
Mr. Blanchard?
Yes, so Chairman Mendelson, we will make that decision on the 26th or shortly thereafter, or have a decision in place so it can be implemented. And when Ms. Morgan Johnson separates from the agency. But our plan is to have Ms. Shu continue as the interim executive director at that point.
But the board will have to decide. I'm confused.
So the board has to take a vote to do that. And we'll probably do that at our meeting later this month. But where there's a convoluted discussion of acting versus interim that the board went through at its last meeting. And we were advised by council that we should formally make that decision when the person separates, when Ms. Johnson separates. But I can tell you that our intent is to have Ms. Shu act as interim going forward. She is acting right now.
I don't want to spend much time on this, but why would the general counsel advise that you couldn't be making a decision now based on what you know to be the retirement of Ms. Morgan Johnson?
Exactly. It is complicated. The explanation we got was complex, but we have in essence made our decision.
It sounds unnecessarily complicated. The board should make a decision rather than being advised by its attorney that it needs to make two decisions. We have a hearing tomorrow.
Yes.
I haven't looked at the witness list, so I'm not quite sure who's there, but the purpose of the hearing tomorrow is for trustees to make the case of why the council should be addressing residency as well as the salary. I think you know that at a informal meeting of council members a week ago, March 2nd, there was considerable pushback from members about residency, relaxing residency, and the trustees need to make the case tomorrow why residency is important, or what trade-offs we make with regard to salary to overcome if residency is a hurdle.
Understood.
Or any other issues that are a hurdle to attracting a permanent executive director.
We will do that. Thank you.
So, Ms. Shu, what were you doing before you came to the board? You said you came 4 months ago?
7 months ago, I joined in August, August 3rd. I was working for a trade association, a large trade association that offers multiple employer plan participation for its members. So I was in the retirement plan operations.
So you're steeped in experience with plan administration.
Yes, sir.
All right, let me see. Let me see. I'm looking at some questions that I have. We'd sent some pre-hearing questions. In question 36, the committee asked you about the competitiveness of salaries compared with other retirement organizations. The answer that we got largely sidestepped what was being asked. The core of the question is whether the salaries can attract top talent. Have salaries been an issue in recruiting senior positions? Now, this is speaking more broadly than just the executive director.
Certainly, I will need to get you a full answer on any historical practices and challenges. I can tell you that we have made a number of executive hires in the last several months. We expect to make another one shortly. So it does not appear that our qualified candidates have faced that hurdle. I do know that there are certain grandfather provisions and there were certain transition rules in place as well. We will need to get you a full written response to that.
Okay. The Inspector General for the district issued a report last June, evaluation of procurement processes and selected contracts. And in its findings, it included well, it had many, but of its findings, 2 of them were this. One, DCRB's procurement department was unstaffed. DCRB's procurement department is responsible for overseeing and managing the solicitation, award, and administration of all contracts. According to an organizational chart the agency provided, the executive director directly oversees the department, which consists of a procurement manager, a senior contract specialist, and a support position. After experiencing substantial turnover in these positions during prior years, DCRB's procurement department was vacant in the fall of 2018. The position has remained vacant throughout our evaluation, again issued last June. As of the conclusion of our field work, DCRB did not have plans to fill these vacancies, and the future of DCRB's procurement department remained uncertain. The next finding was DCRB had other vacancies, including senior level positions. Vacancies at DCRB were not limited to the procurement department. DCRB's organizational chart listed 17 vacancies out of 67 full-time equivalent FTEs. Many of the 17 vacancies were senior level positions, including that of finance controller, director of investment compliance and risk management, and IT director. Other vacancies included the projects coordinator and budget manager, legal assistant, and IT specialist. And I know from a recent meeting with the Inspector General that there's concern that because of these vacancies, there's a doubling up of responsibilities, which then increases the risk with regard to decisions and vulnerability to waste or fraud or abuse. So let me ask you, is the Chief Operating Officer, is that filled or vacant?
That is vacant at this time.
The Chief Financial Officer,
The hire and pre-hire work has been completed and we are we are waiting for their start date. We're expecting that to be Monday.
the Chief Procurement Officer,
The procurement office has not been staffed in-house since 2018, and we have been working with the Office of Contracting and Procurement via a memorandum of understanding to ensure that those services are provided and supported.
so you're relying on OCP, that's Office of
At
Contracting.
this time, yes, while we are continuing to recruit.
Since 2018. The Executive Director is vacant. I realize you are there, but you're not the permanent, so the position is vacant.
Understood.
The Chief Benefits Officer is new. When was that person hired?
That's me. The position was retitled Pension Administrator, and I started August 3rd, 2020.
What again, you just said, and I blanked, a pension administrator. right?
Yes.
Or pension administrator. And the Chief Investment Officer, that's been recently filled?
Yes, by Mark Spindell. He joined on August 3rd, 2020.
The Chief Technology Officer.
We do not have a Chief Technology Officer. That position is IT Director, and it's filled by Ram Murthy, who started October 2019
October 19th of last year.
of 2019, October.
Of-
not-
That title is now IT Director?
Yes.
Why not Chief Technology Officer?
I don't know the answer to that. We'll need to provide you with a response.
Oh, that sounds like that's somehow in the org chart, a lesser responsibility?
I don't know what the expectations were for the change in the position, and we can certainly get you that response in writing.
Okay. Do you have a position called Director of Internal Audit?
I believe we do have that position, and it is vacant at this time.
I realize Councilmember McDuffie is here. Give me just a minute or so, and then I'll recognize him. All right, Ms. Shu, you said you will get back to us regarding the salaries, whether it's an issue with recruiting for these positions?
We will.
Okay, I will have other questions if Mr. McDuffie doesn't cover them regarding some of the these reports. Councilmember McDuffie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Sue and Mr. Blanchard and the rest of the team at the Retirement Board. I only have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. One related to the CAF and the other related to the bill that we worked with the committee on the whole to pass, which Ms. Sue referenced in her testimony. With respect to the CAFR, and I think the chairman mentioned that we held a hearing on the comprehensive annual financial report just maybe like a month ago or so. And in testimony from that hearing, I believe it was the Inspector General who referenced, and I want to get this phrase correct. I'm not sure if he mentioned I'll let you tell me, Ms. Sue. I thought I heard a significant deficiency, but I don't want to misstate that because I know that's a critical sort of a phrase when it comes to audits. And so I'll let you tell me what exactly it was. But in any event, there was some reference to the internal controls over the retirement board. And in addition to the deficiency that was noted in the 2019 CAFR. And so I just want to get your explanation as to what that audit said and how you all have begun to respond to that. And what, if any, changes you've already put in place to address some of the concerns that were raised. And I guess the threshold question is whether you agree with what was actually raised in the audit.
Thank you for your questions, Councilmember McDuffie. We did receive a report with 4 significant deficiencies. As you noted, the term significant deficiency is a specifically defined term that's used by our audit firm in determining the level of any deficiency that they identify and is required to be reported. With respect to our internal controls, there were a number of prongs of their recommendation, and they're at the root of their finding. One is the lack of a chief financial officer. We all know that leadership is critical to a healthy and supported and accountable financial function. Without that role and that specific role, as was alluded to earlier, there's also a kind of piling on of job responsibilities, which does make it very challenging. We also noted that there were some accounting services that were recommended to help us with some additional work that needs to be done. That is moving forward. And then written policies and procedures. We have absolutely begun work. We are absolutely not in a place where we have kind of overcome that hurdle. We do understand that this is the clear shot across the bow and these must be corrected.
So let me ask you this. Do you have a sense of a time frame within which they can be corrected?
Well, our chief financial officer, we are expecting will start imminently. We are also moving forward to more regular implementing some of the other recommendations, including regular internal financial reports for internal use and evaluation by management, as well as those charged with governance. That also speaks to some of the routine closing activities that we can certainly tackle. And then there is another set of recommendations, or excuse me, of deficiencies that were noted that repeat the prior year because those conditions continue to exist on their own in the current year.
So the ones that repeat from the prior year, is there any reason that you can cite as to why they repeat? Or is it related to the same sort of hiring and positions and personnel concerns?
Those repeated conditions were pretty clear from year to year.
Okay. And in terms of your statement and your testimony where you mentioned that DCRB is experiencing an intense level of transition, is it that intense level of transition in part related to some of the things that you're talking about now with in response to my questions and the chairman's questions about the IG report?
Absolutely. Without as I spoke to the priorities, having a full and robust executive leadership team who's engaged, having a full board who's engaged with them, and having the appropriate service providers and consultants, those are the first things we need to do to write the course. We need that level of expertise. We need that level of guidance so that we can support our staff in doing their best work.
Okay. I heard a part of the conversation when I joined the hearing where the chairman asked about interim versus acting, and I heard Mr. Blanchard respond to that. Do you know if residency is required at an acting capacity? I guess maybe I'll direct that to either one of you actually.
I don't know the answer to the requirements in an acting capacity.
Okay, do you know, Mr. Blanchard?
I don't think it makes a difference, Councilmember McDuffie, whether it's acting or interim. I think all senior level staff at any district agency, whether it's a part of the executive branch or an independent agency, that doesn't report directly to the mayor. The statute, which I think, I can't remember right off the top of my head, I think it's DC Code 1-511, requires senior level managers to all satisfy the residency requirement.
Got it.
There are certain exemptions. There was some grandfathering because that's a recent council enactment from, I believe, about 2 years ago that kind of tightened up
Mhm.
the residency requirement.
Sure.
But yes, it's required. There is, people can ask for a hardship waiver.
And there's a period of time generally that they have to comply with that, correct?
That's correct. It's a 180-day period.
Okay.
Beyond that, they have to ask for a hardship, and then it has to be approved by DCHR.
Ms. Sue, do you live in the District of Columbia?
Yes, sir, I do.
Great, awesome. The only thing that can top that is you say you live in Ward 5. Don't answer. I'll just leave it out there just in case.
Thumbs the word.
So my only other question, you mentioned in your testimony about the diverse fund managers and the efforts of the council. It's a bill that I introduced a couple of times and worked with the chair to pass just last year. What's the time frame for compliance on that? What does the first report actually do for that?
I believe it's due, well, go ahead, Ms. Shu, if you know.
No, I don't. I was going to ask.
I believe it's due next month. And if so, it'll be part of the submissions with the agency's responses to the budget questions.
Trustee Blanchard.
Yes.
It
Oh,
will be
Mr.
part of-
Smith, great.
Thank you, Councilmember. The report will be part of our 2020 CAFR. So the report's been prepared and it will be published in the forthcoming CAFR.
So in other words,
We do a separate CAFR, just to be clear.
so when is that going to be published? Is that what you mean is going to be published next month?
I believe so. Mr. Spindell, can you?
Karen, when is the CAFR coming out?
I believe the due date is 210 days following the close of the fiscal year, which was September 30th. So we are still in that period to publish, and it will be published timely.
220 days after the close of September.
210,
10 days
so
after.
just shy of 7 months, yes.
Okay, I'm not. Didn't go to school for math. I chose the law.
So it's going to be beyond the end of March, but sometime in April.
Okay, so can you all talk about what steps you all are taking to comply with that and to make sure that those requirements in that legislation are met?
Mr. Spindell?
Happy to do that. Again, as per the legislation, we have prepared the report in this year's CAFR identifying our 2 managers who are considered emerging, that is with less than $2 billion in assets, and diverse as written substantial minority or women ownership or leadership. Our investment consultant, who we work very closely with, is doing a more comprehensive survey of diversity and inclusion throughout the industry, and we are availing ourselves of that research as well as other data. Indeed, next week, we will seek approval from the Board of Trustees for our first new emerging and diverse private market manager with all of the due diligence done during COVID. I'd like to thank the council in saying that your sunshine should work. We want to hire more diverse managers, and we'll continue to consider all managers that meet those our fiduciary and financial objectives.
Okay, all right, well, I appreciate that. I do not have any additional questions at the moment, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a couple questions and thank you all for answering them. Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. So in looking at the organizational chart that you gave us and as part of the pre-hearing questions, there's also a vacancy. It's not clear to me how many, maybe 2 in the executive/office support. Is that correct?
Sorry, yes, sir.
How many vacancies?
Just one moment. There are two, including our receptionist position.
So the business operations manager and board liaison is filled?
Yes,
Okay. And there's,
I apologize. It's a receptionist and one executive assistant position who report up through the business operations manager and board liaison.
okay. And then in human resources, there's a vacancy there?
Yes, that is an approved vacancy that is going to become available in a future fiscal year.
Okay. And in investments, there are two vacancies?
There are, yes.
Obviously not the chief investment officer, Mr. Spin,
Nope.
that's you.
Two junior positions.
Senior positions within your office that are vacant, or are they?
Two junior positions. Yes, one position description has been written. We're just waiting to release it and work on the second one as soon as that one's wrapped up.
Okay, and there's a vacancy in IT?
Yes. There is a vacancy for an IT specialist.
And you're going to get back to me and tell me why the chief technology officer became the IT director.
Yes, we will.
And there's a vacancy, it's not clear to me, in legal. So the general counsel is present or occupied, and then under her is, it's not clear to me. Senior counsel 2, vacancy legal.
I believe there is a vacancy in legal. I don't have that detail available though, but we'll be happy to respond to you in writing.
Okay, and then below that on the organizational chart is compliance, and that's probably not correct to say below. There is under the general counsel a compliance officer.
Yes, that's a change in recent years.
And the director is filled, but there's still 3 vacancies?
There is a director of risk and compliance position and also a pension risk and compliance program manager. And yes, there are vacancies as we build out that function.
So these are new positions?
I'm unclear if they are new or repurposed. We can get you that answer in writing. One of those legal positions is also the internal auditor.
Which was a question I asked earlier, the director of audit, which is vacant.
So that would be included in the legal and compliance area.
Okay, this is concerning to me. Now, looking at the Inspector General's compliance report issued 2 months ago. The first finding of significant deficiency, management did not implement the fiscal year 2019 findings issued by the prior auditor. These findings, when taken together, were considered to be a significant deficiency in internal control over financial reporting. They include, management did not incorporate audit adjustments for fiscal year 2018 in the general ledger. And I'll repeat, this was apparently from the 2019 CAFR, but nothing was done last year. Management does not have a formal written financial reporting process manual in place. And at present, investment managers' fees are paid as invoiced and not recalculated to ensure that they comply with the terms of the respective investment management agreements. So the first finding of significant deficiency was actually a reiteration of a finding from the previous year about what nothing was done.
Correct. Finding 2020-01 is the current year conditions that existed 2019-00 one is also included, which is the prior year. So the prior year was carried forward as it was not remediated. And then the failure to remediate in the current year generated its own significant deficiency on the same topics.
Correct. So we both agree is that that's what the significant deficiency is.
Yes, sir.
And I find it disturbing because I'm sure that last year we were told, or maybe it was that the auditor was told that that would be addressed and nothing happened.
That appears to be the case. Our CFO left in April 2020, so I did not have an overlap with him. We can provide any other historical information in writing.
I'm more interested in expressing concern that nothing was done last year despite promises and that it needs to be fixed. The second finding was untimely preparation of auditable financial statements.
Yes, sir.
A significant deficiency. The accounting department was unable. I just find this amazing. The accounting department was unable to provide a proper trial balance to commence the fiscal year 2020 audit. The first draft trial balance provided for audit was significantly incomplete. It took several weeks and significant effort of management to provide a final trial balance. Also, management failed to produce timely financial statements. The accounting department did not have a chief financial officer for approximately half the fiscal year, and the posting of various transactions to the ledger was untimely. How quickly can you state how quickly this will be fixed?
We have our CFO starting in days, which will be extremely helpful. We did focus on the ability to bring the department up to speed and to remediate some of these issues. We also have moved forward on securing some accounting services that will be critical to enabling us to move forward with complete and clear financial records. We also are beginning to produce quarterly financial statements for internal use, as was also recommended by the auditors.
Does he or she know about these findings?
I did not disclose them personally. I don't know for sure how available they were made. I do know that this is a public document.
The third finding of significant deficiency was improper evaluation of limited partnership investments. DCRB investment portfolio includes limited partnership investments held by private managers of over $900 million. So that's close to 10% of your assets. We performed a reconciliation of the amounts confirmed by the fund managers with the custodian and the amounts reported by DCRB. We noted that the valuation of limited partnership investments did not reflect the valuations as confirmed by the various investment managers. These investments were carried in the financial statements at the June 30th, 2020 values, adjusted for cash flows. We requested that management assess the difference for the entire population. Consequently, an adjustment of approximately $67 million was made to reflect the accurate market value. How did that happen?
So if I may, the standard practice for reporting our private market investments, as you said, about 10% of the fund, is to mark them 3 months in arrears. They're private assets, they're less liquid. There's a fairly intense process at the individual partnership level to get those assets in place. And what we're doing is no different from what other public pension plans are doing with that 3 months in arrears. Every quarter that would catch up as the partnerships are included. Because we did the financial statements later this year, we actually had the benefit of the September 30 valuations, and I believe that's what the auditors are referencing. That truing up to 9/30/2020 reflects the significant gains in all markets in the in the third quarter.
Okay, so that's what happened, but the auditor clearly was displeased. It was a significant deficiency.
I don't see a way for us to accelerate the marking to market of our private market activities. But in this particular case, one of the single best performing quarters for all asset markets resulted in the significant gains that you mentioned.
Well, this was the agency response. I mean, you just said you don't see how you could do true up, but the agency response was, we agree with this comment and acknowledge our responsibility for review and recording of all financial transactions, including investment evaluation as of the fiscal year end.
Which we do, and as and when we have those true ups, we can certainly reflect them. We just can't force them sooner than they're available.
Yeah, this report was issued January 2021, which is over 3 months after the end of the fiscal year.
At which point we had the 9/30 valuations, the fiscal year end valuation.
Which was not given to the auditor. The auditor had to struggle to get it. Let me move on. And then the report concludes with status of prior year finding number 2019-1, significant deficiency in internal control over financial reporting. During the course of our audit, we considered the fund's internal controls over financial reporting and noted weaknesses in internal controls when recording transactions in the general ledger, which when taken together are considered as a significant deficiency in internal control over financial reporting. Following matters were noted. Management did not incorporate audit adjustments for fiscal year 2018 in the general ledger. I'm not going to read all of it. I'll go to the second one. Management does not have a formal written financial reporting process manual in place. And number 3 was at present investment managers' fees are paid as invoiced and not recalculated. And I'll just note that the response from the agency to the auditor was, quote, we agree with this comment and acknowledge that the circumstances described to us by our auditors had a direct effect on the management accounting and finance activities during the year and resulted in a direct effect on the timing and execution of this year's audit. I'll go back to the Inspector General's procurement evaluation last June. 3 matters limited our field work. First, DCRB's procurement files were frequently disorganized and incomplete. Although the organization and completeness of more recent files seemed to be improved from that of prior year's procurements, the absence of some documents and incompleteness of others impacted our ability to understand what occurred during each pre-award and post-award process. Second, vacancies in the DCRB's procurement department required us to rely heavily on interviews with senior level management. Frontline employees are an important voice in assessing the efficiency and effectiveness of processes they apply daily. When those frontline positions are vacant, our ability to evaluate processes is diminished. And the findings, I noted some of them: unstaffed, vacancies in senior positions besides just procurement. DCRB's structure did not adequately segregate duties. DCRB enlisted OCP's assistants, but the objectives of the assistants were unclear. DCRB employees involved in procurement and board members, DCRB employees involved in procurement and board members were unfamiliar with the intricacies of procurement rules and did not appreciate the importance of effective internal controls. There were a number of recommendations. Maybe I will stop the pain and not keep reading all of this. But one of the recommendations was training for the board. Has that occurred?
I believe there has been board training. For specifics, we'll need to give you a written response.
That would be training with regard to procurement. Mr. Blanchard?
Yes. We have gotten some training on procurement, and we're in the process of trying to get out new procurement rules. We haven't issued those yet because we wanted the new CFO, who again will start on Monday, to look at those before we send those forward for publication in the DC Register and submit them to your committee for council review. And once we do that, then we'll also be able to adopt the new procurement manual. So yes, the board is getting some training on procurement, and the board is well aware of the OIG's recommendations from its report last year and the follow-up report in January. These are issues which are at the top of our list for getting addressed. We don't want to have this continue any further. It's already been that the previous CFO left a mess, and we're working very hard now to clean it up.
Mr. Blanchard, do you know, have all the members received a copy of the Inspector General's report from last June?
Yes, they have. I've printed it out and I have it in a binder in my office, which I refer to regularly.
Okay, that would be you, but you're just one of, I believe it's 18 board members?
6 and 6, 12 plus the Mr. Fernandez.
So that's you, one of 13 board members.
Yes,
Do the other 12 have the auditor's report?
I'm pretty sure they
Excuse me,
do.
Inspector General's.
Yes,
And how about the auditor's report from this January? With the significant deficiencies?
if they don't, I'll make sure they have it by the board meeting next Thursday.
So Ms. Shu, would it be fair to ask you, because you are acting, so I don't know if it's fair, for a timeline and when each of these matters is going to be resolved?
I don't know that I have a plan in place that would be appropriate to share publicly. We need to wait for that chief financial officer to begin, and we will immediately have conversations about prioritizing and executing against these deficiencies so that they do not continue or repeat.
Well, I was going to ask you if it's fair to set a deadline of when we have the hearing with you on your budget. But that's going to be 2 months from now. And I think you ought to have a plan before then.
We should have a plan before then.
Ms. Shu, are you aware that the Inspector General had indicated to me that he might issue a management alert report, an MAR?
I haven't been part of any conversations with him.
I know several of the board members were aware of that because that was part of a rather animated discussion. Do you when I refer to a management alert report, do you know what I'm talking about?
Not in depth. My basic understanding is just that, very, very cursory.
Well, a management alert report is something that an auditor or an inspector general will issue when they are, let me see, it's something that they issue when time is of the essence and there is a matter of significant concern that they want to bring to the attention of not only management, but the mayor and the council.
Okay.
So it's like if the auditor is doing an audit on something and sees something that's alarming, they will issue a management alert report, MAR.
Understood.
And the Inspector General has been considering issuing an MAR for the retirement board. Because of some of the problems I just highlighted and the vacancies.
And Mr. Mendelson, we have spoken with Mr. Lucas about that. Some of the members of the board, not including Ms. Shu, recently. And we're going to be working closely with his office to address these issues.
I'm sorry, say that very last part. You've spoken with Mr. Lucas and
Correct.
we will be
And we're going to
addressing-
be working very closely with his office to make sure the agency is working closely with his office as well to address these issues.
Okay, Ms. Shu, the agency had an MOU with the Office of Contracting and Procurement, but apparently no longer has it. Or is it that it just hasn't been executed?
I believe we are in the process of having the MOU updated as we speak. I don't know if it was fully executed or not. I'll have to find out for you.
Okay, as of a week ago, it wasn't executed. It didn't exist as far as we know. If you would get back to us on that.
Certainly.
And there's no longer an MOU for DC Net Internet Services?
I believe there is an MOU for DCNet. There are 2 or 3 MOUs with the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. One of them is for DCNet.
Well, I'm referring to question number 16.
The status of the current year MOU. We will follow up on that for you.
Okay.
I believe it's in process.
Give me just a second. I don't know if you can get this to us by tomorrow morning's hearing, but it would be helpful to us if we had a breakdown of the annuitants in your system by state of residence.
Yes, I have that. For the annuitant population, we have annuitants in 49 of the 50 states and the District of Columbia. 49.7% are in Maryland, 17.9% are in the district, and 9.6% are in Virginia. That's about 77% of the total annuitant population. The states with the next greatest number of annuitants or percentage of our annuitant population are Florida and North Carolina.
How many in Florida? How many in North Carolina, if you have that?
In Florida, it's 6.1%, and in North Carolina, it's 3.5%. From there, the next greatest are below 2%.
And can you provide a breakdown of DCRB staff by state of residence?
Yes, currently we have 21.8% district residents, 65.5% are Maryland residents, and 12.7% are Virginia residents.
You were too fast for me.
I
60.
apologize. 21.8% are district residents, 65.5% are Maryland residents, and 12.7% live in Virginia.
Okay. Do you know among senior staff what the breakdown is?
I don't off the top of my head, no. We would have to provide that.
But it might be helpful. So if you could provide that.
Certainly. I also have 2 additional pieces of information that you asked about earlier. The MOU with OCP is pending review with the executive director, so that has moved forward. And regarding the shift from the chief technology officer to the director of IT, the scope of that position did change, and we did move a number of support services to the office of the chief technology officer. So with their support, the scope of that position was adjusted.
Well, if you moved services to the office, that would suggest more responsibility, which sounds like a chief than a director.
No, more to the office of the chief technology officer of the
To the
district,
district's OCTO.
and
Oh,
away from our direct control and work.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for you now. Mr. Blanchard, I think you're testifying tomorrow?
That's correct.
Okay, and I think Mr. Shu is not?
That's correct.
Okay, so do you have any questions for me about tomorrow? Not that I can answer them.
No, you've already, for me or for Ms. Shu?
For you, Mr. Blanchard, do you have any questions for me for about tomorrow?
No, I do not.
Okay, I see Mr. McDuffie. I must have stimulated him to ask another question.
No, I just wanted to, before you close out, Mr. Chairman, to ask whether Mr. Blanchard and Ms. Sue are aware of the request that I made via email. I got a partial response. I want to make sure that you all are aware that I made a request for some information.
Yes, we are aware, and we are working to gather and review the information, and we'll continue to provide it as we can. We've been in direct contact with your office, and we'll continue that communication.
Okay, when can I expect to have everything, the minutes?
I'm not prepared to answer that question today. I apologize. I will need to check my notes.
Do you all have the information that I requested? I know that some of it, I apologize. I put a very short time frame in the initial email, and I gave you a little latitude on some of the recordings, but I'm just talking about minutes at this point. I got a response that didn't include some of the minutes. I just want to make sure that you all have that information.
Mr. McDuffie, we do have the information. Many of our committee meetings are closed meetings.
Okay.
And the information in those meetings are privileged. So we are reviewing what we can release.
Okay.
And draft, we do not, we have a concern about the board members.
If you respond in email, I didn't necessarily want a response. I wanted to make sure that you all were aware and that you all had planned to respond, because we got something that didn't include everything. That's all.
Right. And if there's additional things, I'd welcome a chance to meet with you privately to
Oh, sure.
figure out.
All right. Well, I'm not sure if I'll be able to join you all for the second part of this next tomorrow, but I wanted to just check in with that information before you signed off, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDuffie, and I'll just remind you that recordings of our hearings will be available within a few days on the council website. In case.
And I look forward to viewing that with glee.
Okay. That's the way council members spend their late nights, each other's hearings. Thank you, council member, and thank you, Ms. Shu and Mr. Blanchard and Mr. Spindell. And you're now excused.
Thank you, Chairman.
We will turn now to the other Post-Employment Benefit Administration, and the witness is Bruno Fernandez, who is Deputy Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and the members of the Committee of the Whole.
Good
I'm Bruno
afternoon.
Fernandez, Deputy Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer of the District of Columbia. I'm pleased to testify on the fiscal 2020 performance of the other post-employment benefits fund, hereinafter referred to as the fund or the plan. The trust fund's assets are used to pay health and life insurance benefits for the participating annuitants and the associated administrative expenses. The trust fund is administered by the Office of Finance and Treasury pursuant to the annuitants' health and life insurance employer contribution plan. As you are aware, council legislation established the other post-employment advisory committee, here referred to as the advisory committee, comprised of independent outside subject matter experts who provide an additional level of oversight on important issues that can impact the performance and the value of the trust fund, including actuarial assumptions, investment objectives, and recommendations regarding best practices. The advisory committee meets annually. The last meeting was held on January 19th, 2021. At the meeting, OFT provided advisory committee with performance overview of the program and shared information similar to this testimony. As of September 30th, 2020, the trust fund was valued at $1.64 billion with 2,551 beneficiaries participating. For comparison, the program valued at $1.51 billion at the end of fiscal year 2019 with 1,939 beneficiaries participating. Performance this year was led by the equity markets. The fund rose 7.03% versus the overall policy benchmark of 7.89%. For comparison purposes, the fund had a rate of return of 1.70% and 5.22% as of September 30th, 2019 and September 30th, 2018, respectively. For the 5-year period, ending September 30th, 2020, the fund had a return of 7.24%. The rate of return since inception was 6.96%. This was above our target actuarial rate of 6.50%. The fund generated net investment income of $107.4 million. The annual contribution to the trust fund was $47.3 million for fiscal year 2020. And compared to that, $46 million in 2019. The contribution budget for 2021 is $53.3 million. An actuarial analysis of the plan's assets and liabilities is performed annually to determine the funding status of the plan. The plan had a funding ratio of 101.2% for the year ending September 30th, 2020. A plan's funding ratio is the ratio of the value of the plan's assets to the actuarial accrued liability at a point in time. A plan is considered fully funded when the funding ratio is between 90 and 120% as of the actuarial analysis date. A ratio of 101.2% means the trust fund is fully funded. OFT has made considerable efforts over the past few years to monitor the trust fund's investments, actuarial analysis, and all necessary elements to ensure the trust fund is funded at a level to provide the district's cost portion of the annuitants' health and insurance needs. OFT works directly with our investment consultant, Siegel Markle Advisors, to constantly review the performance of our investment managers. Siegel also worked with us to determine the proper asset allocation to achieve the plan's investment return target. The goal of the allocation was to provide the best risk-adjusted returns. Last year, we did not make any asset allocation changes. However, we did sell out of a large cap fund and invested those funds into SSGA's Russell 1000 Growth Index Fund. The underperformance of the large cap fund was the main driver for the underperformance of the plan in the previous years. By transferring funds to this fund, the investment tracked its benchmark and improved overall returns for the period. During fiscal 2020, we issued a request for proposal for investment management services under a co-fiduciary outsourced chief investment officer model. Employing this approach will allow us to invest more dynamically and nimbly in the recommended asset allocation within the investment policy parameters to achieve higher risk-adjusted returns. A contract was awarded to Aon Investments in January of this year. We are currently in the process of onboarding the firm and working together to review and update our investment policy. We will likewise continue to work with the Department of Human Resources, the Advisory Committee, and the actuary to ensure that we have the most appropriate asset allocation model for the trust fund. Although the district's trust fund is well funded, we continue to review the trust fund's program to ensure that it not only meets best practices, but exceeds that, which is consistent with one of the Office of the Chief Financial Officer's goals of continuous improvement. We provide and will continue to provide an annual report to the mayor, council, and the public, which includes trust fund information, the audited financials, and plan performance, as well as actuarial information. The financial statements for fiscal year 2020 were completed and given an unqualified clean audit opinion by our CAFR auditors, McConnell Jones. In summary, the trust fund is in excellent shape. Our goals are to continue to oversee a well-funded plan, achieve high risk adjusted returns, and ensure that the trust fund is managed using best practices. This concludes my remarks, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Should I be concerned? You said that the fund rose 7.03% last year versus the overall policy benchmark of 7.89%. That's like 0.75% difference.
Yeah, no, certainly, thank you for the question. We ourselves were concerned, and part of the underperformance was that fund that we sold out of last year, that large cap fund that had a substantial amount of our assets, which was underperforming the benchmark. Since we've made that change, we've closed that gap substantially. In fact, I believe I just got some recent information of how we're doing year to date, and we're now outperforming the benchmark.
So in your statement, when you said that that large cap fund was a drag on prior years, that was including FY20?
Yes, because we made the switch rather late in FY20. We had planned to do it sooner, but because of the pandemic, it delayed our ability to be able to make that switch. But when we did make the switch, we've seen some improvements in the returns, and even past the fiscal year into the current fiscal year, we've continued to see those improvements.
And the difference between 1.64 billion and 1.51 billion is about 130 million, if I did my math correctly. And that's roughly 7%?
Yeah, so it's about $132 million was the difference.
Okay. And that's roughly 7%?
Yeah, so yes, that is correct.
Okay. You indicated in your pre-hearing questions that you have a number of vacancies, 5, 9.
We do. We have 6 FTEs that we can hire. We have 5 vacancies. We have been relying heavily on our consultants as well as the staff from the Office of Finance and Treasury. We have gone through an extensive recruitment of trying to bring in some staff to support the plan. Right now, we're going through a more focused approach. We did have one candidate that joined that has since left us. And then it's been a little bit difficult in trying to hire some of these positions. We're competing with the private sector, and sometimes that creates some difficulties, but we're continuing to try to make progress on that front.
So how much of a problem is this that you have 5 vacancies? You said you can hire 6, but you have 5 vacancies. How can you hire 6 if you have 5 vacancies?
Well, we have 6 positions, FTEs, and we have 5 vacancies of the 6.
Okay, I thought you had 9 positions. That's a mistake on my part.
Yes, I mean I only have 6 here in my but we can confirm that.
No. Anyway, all right, I'll go with your number 6. So you have 5. So you're relying on the contracts that you have.
Contracts and some of our staff in the Office of Finance and Treasury. So we are leveraging some of the expertise that we have within the OFT. Obviously, that's not sustainable as the plan continues to grow. So we are making an extensive effort a more focused effort to try to hire these positions. They're critical to the fund.
So how problematic is this? How concerning is this? I just chewed out the retirement board for its vacancies.
Yeah, no, it's so the good news is our plan is well run. We don't have any issues. We did not have any concerns that were raised by the auditors. We are, working with our consultants both on the accounting front as well as our consultants on the investment side. Now that we've brought on board an outsourced investment officer, chief investment officer, I think that will help us with the ability to be able to hire additional staff. Clearly, we're putting a little bit of pressure on people within my department, and that's obviously not sustainable. But in terms of being a problem, it's not a problem. We're certainly doing a very good job of running the plan, but we want to make sure that we staff it appropriately.
You have an advisory board. Are there vacancies on the advisory board?
I'm sorry?
You have an advisory board. Are there vacancies on the advisory board?
No, there are no vacancies on the advisory board. There are 7 members on the advisory board, and they're all full. Everybody, there's a position for each one of them.
When can we expect your annual report?
By April 1st. I actually expect to have it to you sooner.
Okay, that would be great. The market is healthier than we thought it would be. Does the healthier market indicate that this year's contribution from the district may need to be lessened?
Yes, so I can actually give you a little bit of information on that. It will be lessened by a little bit, not much. It'll go from 53.3 million to 53.2 million. So it's a small reduction, but nonetheless, it's better than an increase that we've seen over the past few years. We should start to see that might actually improve. We're waiting for our actuarial experience report right now. But right now, that's the number that we're getting, because there are some adjustments that needed to be made to some of the assumptions. But we'll start to see how that plays out here in the next year or two.
The adjustments were more conservative, more liberal, more...
It was a mix of both, a little bit of an increase on the liability side, and then an improvement where I believe they said that there was some benefits from individuals being able to use I believe it was the Medicaid advance aspect, and that's being a little bit of a cheaper alternative. So that will reduce the liability on that front. But some of our assumptions needed to increase on both the teachers and the police and fire. So that offset some of that benefit. It was the Medicaid Advantage plan. I'm sorry. I was looking for the word.
Last year, we discussed a new position on your organizational chart for a benefits coordinator. However, according to this year's organizational chart, that position no longer exists. Why was the position necessary a year ago, but not now?
It has now been retitled financial analyst. It'll still have, be still a benefits administrator, but it will have a little bit more of a broader scope. And that person will be a liaison between the plan and DCHR.
I say, I don't see benefits administrator or benefits coordinator in the term financial analyst.
Yeah, we were having a hard time being able to hire that benefits administrator. So we transitioned the position to something else, and we've tweaked a little bit of the responsibilities. In essence, it's very similar in a sense, but there'll be more analytical work as well. So it's not just an administrator.
Okay.
And it ties in a little bit well with our some of the other positions that are in our Office of Finance and Treasury.
In the past, I have been concerned that OPEB is this benefit to district government employment. Just so that the public knows what we're talking about, if a person works for the district government or retires from the district government, of course they have to have a certain number of years of service, but if they work for the government and they retire from the government, their health costs will be picked up by this.
Right.
And that can be a good deal. But there hasn't been as much take up by employees as I would have liked to have seen. Has that been picking up?
It has been picking up. And in fact, we've been doing some more investment seminars And so we've continued to educate folks on this plan. Clearly, you're right. It was slow to evolve, but we are starting to see a lot more interest in the plan. Especially as employees now become more eligible to start taking up the plan, we're starting to get more interest in the plan as well. But certainly, it did take a little while to kind of get up and running, but we're starting to see that activity pick up. We've been doing, investment seminars. We've been doing a lot of educational stuff to try to help people understand what the plan means and how it works and how to take advantage of it.
Remind me how this, how OPEB relates to Medicare. So a person over 65 or 70 will be on Medicare. That picks up health benefits. So how does OPEB relate?
So Medicare is the primary, and then the supplemental will be picked up by OPEB. So if you have the supplemental portion of Medicare, so Medicare is actually the primary, and so what happens is OPEB will pick up the premiums of that supplemental insurance that you get that provides the additional benefits.
And the individual can pick their supplemental, or OPEB picks it?
They can pick their supplemental.
Yeah. Let me just see if I have any other questions. Hold on a second.
Sure.
I do not have any other questions for you. I look forward to the annual report, which you say will be no later than April 1st.
That is correct.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you.
And that will conclude this hearing. Have a good evening. This has been so I'm closing out the hearing. This has been a hearing on oversight hearing by the Committee of the Whole on agencies under our purview. Our next oversight hearing will be Monday from 3 to 6. We will hear testimony from Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. Next Wednesday, the Commission on Arts and Humanities and the University of the District of Columbia from noon to 3, and next Thursday from noon to 3, Office of Zoning, Office of Planning, and DCRA. The time is now 6:13 in the evening, and this hearing is